got a packed house tonight. All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So we'll start with roll call.
All right. Commissioner Banta.
Here.
Commissioner Bouters.
Here.
Commissioner Cardoza.
Here.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner Kang.
Present.
Vice Chair Keller.
Here.
Chair Gunkel.
Here.
All 7 commissioners are present.
So then, if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on any items that are not on the agenda tonight? Oh, okay. We have a couple special items on the agenda. First is the swearing in of our new commissioner.
So, Commissioner Banta, if you could step down here to the podium, please, and Deputy City Clerk Tom McGurk will administer the oath of office.
Right into the mic.
All right.
Slowly raise your right hand. Just repeat after me.
Will do.
I state your name.
I, Philip Banta,
Planning Commissioner.
Planning Commissioner,
Do so solemnly swear. That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of
And
California.
the Constitution of the State of California.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies,
Foreign and domestic.
foreign and domestic.
That I bear true faith and allegiance.
That I bear true faith and allegiance.
To the Constitution of the United States.
To the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And to the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties upon which I am about to enter.
The duties upon which I am about to enter.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Right, we got a full count now. And now for recognition of our outgoing commissioner.
All right. Well, the commission has collaborated on the preparation of a resolution of appreciation for Sean Moss. Mr. Moss, if you would like to step up to the podium to be appropriately vetted. The resolution states as follows. Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Emeryville expressing the Commission's sincere appreciation to Sean Moss for 4 years of service on the Emeryville Planning Commission. Whereas on February 7th, 2012, the City Council appointed Sean Moss to the Emeryville Planning Commission to fill a vacancy created by the resignation of Commissioner Arthur Hoff. And whereas the Council reappointed Sean for a second 3-year term from July 1st, 2012 to June 30th, 2015, and reappointed him to a third 3-year term beginning on July 1st, 2015. And whereas Sean has resigned from the commission effective December 11th, 2015 because he is abandoning Emeryville and moving to Oakland, gasp, and is therefore ineligible to continue to serve on the commission. And whereas Sean served as vice chair of the Planning Commission from September 2013 to June 2014 and as chair of the commission from July 2014 to June 2015. And whereas in his capacity as chair of the commission, Sean presided along with the mayor at a joint study session of the Planning Commission and City Council held on May 2nd, 2015 to discuss proposed regulations, incentives, and guidelines for multi-unit residential development. And whereas during Sean's term on the commission, a number of major development projects were approved by the commission, including the Emeryville Center of Community Life, the intersection Maz mixed-use project, Hyatt Place Hotel at Bay Street, the 3706 San Pablo Avenue Affordable Housing Project, Christie Avenue Park redesign and expansion, Marketplace Parcel C grocery store and residential project, Marketplace Parcel D residential project, Marketplace A residential project, and Marketplace subdivision map. And Sean played an active role in the deliberations on these and many other projects. And wait, there's more. Whereas during Sean's term on the commission, a number of long-range planning efforts were recommended for approval by the commission and adopted by the City Council, including the Sustainable Transportation Plan, Pedestrian and Bicycle Plan, Emeryville, Berkeley, Oakland Transportation Study, EBOTS, Shellman Design Guidelines, the Family-Friendly Amendment to the Emeryville Design Guidelines, the new planning regulations, and amendments to the planning regulations pertaining to development impact fees, multi-unit residential developments, and significant structures, and Sean played an active role in the deliberations on all of these efforts. And now we get to the good stuff. Whereas Chair Moss kept the commission honest in all matters of fuzzy findings, and whereas out of admiration for Sean's interest in expanding pedestrian access across the city, one commissioner is prepared to make a motion that the pedestrian path abutting the eastern edge of the EBI campus be henceforth called Mossy Trail. And whereas
So moved.
Sean's unique perspective always made us look at things in a different light and made us think of things differently. And whereas, as you have moved from the Emeryville Triangle to a nearby neighborhood in North Oakland, we trust that you will continue to walk your dog at 10 p.m. on pathways in the Emeryville Triangle, as always. And whereas we have sadly lost the guidance of a thoughtful policy wonk who always has one more question, and whereas Sean's immaculate facial hair was the envy of the commission, and whereas Sean's thoughtful and insightful comments and wisdom on a variety of long-range and current planning issues will be greatly missed, now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Sean Moss for his 4 years of outstanding service to the city of Emeryville and its citizens, and wishes him the best of luck in all of his future endeavors. Approved by the Planning Commission of the city of Emeryville at a regular meeting held on Thursday, February 25th, 2016. And here's Sarah.
Oh, that's awesome. Can I?
Of course.
Well, I just want to thank you guys. This is really lovely. This is really awesome. I really love the whereases you added, and I just have to say, what a productive 4 years, huh? I didn't realize that we had done all that in the last 4 years. So I wish you an equally productive, or more so, next 4 years. And it's been a pleasure to serve with all of you and all the past commissioners that aren't here, and to work with the staff continually. So I wish you guys all the best. Thanks.
Given
too,
that
Sean.
this is a resolution of the commission, you've already all signed it, so I guess that means you approve it, but it'd probably be appropriate to have a motion and a second and a vote on this.
So moved.
And seconded?
All right, Commissioner Banta?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowders?
Aye.
Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kang? Aye. Vice Chair Keller?
Aye.
Chair Gunkel?
Aye.
The resolution is passed unanimously.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, so now, if there are any members of the public who would like to speak regarding items that are not on the agenda tonight, if you could please come up. And we'll be limiting speeches to 3 minutes.
This won't take 3 minutes. Sharon Wilshire, Chair of the City's Public Art Advisory Committee, and I just thought I'd take this opportunity to mention Saturday, March the 5th at Ralph Holly School. We're starting the kickoff of our Public Art Master Plan update, and the public is invited. It's from 11 to 4, and it's drop-in. You don't have to stay from 11 to 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So then we'll move on to action item recap.
I'd move approval.
Second.
Is that without exception? Yeah. I'm sorry, who was the second?
Okay. And then the director's report.
All right, well, first let me tell you what the City Council has done since your last meeting. They've met twice on February 2nd and February 16th. On February 2nd, the Council approved the second reading of an ordinance prohibiting the delivery of medical marijuana in Emeryville. And they also approved an amendment to the contract with LSA Associates for the Sherwin-Williams EIR to cover additional work that's required for the document. Of course, you'll be having a public hearing on that in a few minutes. On February 16th, at a special meeting prior to the regular meeting, the council interviewed applicants for the vacant seat on the Planning Commission created by Commissioner Moss's resignation and voted, of course, to appoint Philip Banta. Congratulations to Commissioner Banta. The council held a study session on possible amendments to the noise ordinance, which were presented by the police department and the city attorney, and they gave direction on the preparation of those amendments. The council also approved a commitment to a $3.5 million development loan for the EAH Affordable Housing Project at 3706 San Pablo Avenue, which will help to make the project more competitive for low-income housing tax credits. And finally, the council heard an informational report on code enforcement actions that have been taken recently to address the blighted residential property at 1270 64th Street. In other news, Sharon has already reminded you about the upcoming Public Art Master Plan workshop on March 5th, Saturday, March 5th, from 11 to 2 at the Ralph Hawley School on 61st Street. And I'd also, if you haven't already heard, I'd like to let you know that the grand opening, the long-awaited grand opening of the Joseph Emery Skate Spot is scheduled for Saturday, March 19th, 2 weeks after the Public Art Master Plan workshop, also beginning at 11 a.m. And of course, it's at the Skate Spot Park, which is behind Arizmendi Bakery. The project includes public art among its skate features and barriers. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to disclosure of conflicts of interest and ex parte communications.
I had a meeting with Stacy Wells from Sutter Health.
Stacy Wells with Sutter Health on February 17th, I believe.
I did as well.
I did as well.
Okay. Then we are going to...
You're going to move the agenda?
What's that?
Are you going to move the item?
Yes. So we'll be moving on to the public hearings, and there are a couple items I wanted to address before we move in. One is that item 7B, which is the Marketplace Redevelopment Project Parcel B Garage Building, will be continued to another meeting, possibly in May, I believe. And the second item is that I've gotten the request, and unless there are any objections from fellow commissioners, I'd like to move that item 7D, which is the Sutter Health sign, be moved to the top of the agenda because I know that there are a number of people here to speak on that item, and it should be a quick one, I would guess. So are there any objections to that? Okay. So then we will start with the item 7D, which is the Sutter Health sign.
Give us a minute here while we get our act together.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this is the presentation as requested for the Sutter Health high-rise signs. Location is at 2000 Powell Street out on the peninsula. Powell Street is to the south. So project overview timeline: in July of 2011, there was a master sign program adopted for the towers. And on August 31st, 2015, the Planning Commission denied a major sign permit that was for proposed Sutter Health signs that were inconsistent with the master sign program. A new application for Sutter Health signs that was consistent with the master sign program was approved by staff in November of 2015. In response to that, there was an appeal to the director's decision, and the Planning Commission denied that appeal. Today, we have a new proposal for two new matching high-rise signs, one south-facing and one north-facing at the same building. The illumination is using dimmable LED lights, and they are in two colors, white and teal, and illuminate in two colors, white and soft teal. The proposed signs are not consistent with the master sign program, which is why a major sign permit is required in your review this evening. It's not consistent because of the larger sizes of the sign, the 2 colors instead of only white color that's allowed under the master sign program, inclusion of a logo, and the north location of one of the signs is not included in the master sign program. It is consistent with the Emeryville sign regulations. So the sign size is 169 square feet. It's 35 across and 4 feet 10 inches high. And this is the same on both faces of the building, which are shown over here, north and south. The sign colors, as previously mentioned, are teal and white, and the sides of the sign are a silver color. The sign illuminates in the same colors, but a softer hue of teal. And the signs, as I mentioned, are dimmable, and this is where the dimmer switch mechanisms are located. The south-facing sign is shown here. And in comparison with the master sign program, the proposed signs are longer than under the master sign program, slightly larger, 169 square feet compared to 144 square feet. The 2 colors as mentioned, and it also includes a logo. The north-facing sign matches the south-facing sign in every way, in dimensions, color, materials, design content, and illumination. And as I mentioned, the north sign is not included under the master sign program. Compared to the previously submitted signs, because of the north and south location, the sign is not viewable from Pacific Park Plaza, which is right where this arrowhead is located, actually. But it is very visible from the freeway, which is the target audience, and also the freeway to the south. So the conditions of approval state that a dimmer switch must be installed as part of this, and that it needs to be dimmed to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Development if the director determines the illumination to be too bright. Findings for sign requirements have all been made. The proposed signs are necessary because of the nature of the establishment and its location. They're no larger than necessary. They comply with the planning regulations. The size, materials, colors, graphic style, illumination, and features of the signs keep with the visual character of the area. The proposed signs are readable, and the proposed signs relate well to the design of the building and its architectural features. The general design review findings are consistent with the city will institute sign regulations that create an identity without dominating city and district appearance. And also it conforms with multiple aspects of the Emeryville design guidelines, including architectural compatibility and consistency with the area and character of the signs. Additionally, the signs are of a design quality that are compatible with and will not adversely affect the surrounding area. Planning Regulations Section 9-7216 states that whenever an application for any type of permit under these planning regulations has been denied, no application for essentially the same proposal shall be filed within 1 year. Staff does not believe that these signs are essentially the same. We believe they're different because of the relocation of the east-facing sign to the north side of the building and the considerable size difference between the previous signs and these signs. Staff recommends approval. Stacy Wells from Sutter is here to answer questions and would also like to make a statement when you...
I have a quick question for
Sure.
staff. Is there any, are there any conditions currently stating that the applicant will not in the future pursue the additional signs from the master sign program?
Yes, that is in the conditions
in
of
here,
approval.
okay.
Also, something that I didn't mention during the presentation is you may have noticed in your packet that the renderings of the signs do not match the shop drawings for the signs in the back of the packet. That though the shop drawings match what was previously submitted, that's not what we're approving. We're approving what's in the renderings. The renderings are what's accurate in this case. Because of the quick turnaround between the last sign session and the new Planning Commission deadline, the shop drawings were not modified in time, but they will be modified for any approved signs.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff?
So is the page 2, are the signs on page 2 the ones that are accurate?
Let me grab page 2. Yes, It's the sign, it's the drawings that are the technical drawings about how the signs are to be affixed to the building towards the back of the packet, beginning after page 6. The basic design of those is correct, but how they are affixed, it shows the signs overlapping some of the architectural features, which would have been required under the previous signs. It's not required for these. They just weren't able to redo these quickly enough for the turnaround of this packet.
On sheet number 6, you have the diagram of the best view angles. Can you tell me, for angle A, how was the right side termination of that angle determined?
The applicant created this, so I think it'd be best to direct
Okay.
a question to applicant.
Any other questions for staff?
Could you just say what the square footage dimension, or the square footage dimensions of the signs under the master sign program were?
Yes, let's go back to that slide. Here we go. So under the master sign program, the maximum vertical height is 6 feet. The proposed signs are substantially shorter at 4 feet 10 inches. The horizontal measurement maximum under the master sign program is 24 feet. The proposed signs are significantly longer than that, at 35 feet. This has to do more with the dimensions that were required for both the logo and the design of this particular sign. If they had a shorter name, the sign would probably be smaller.
And the area?
And the area is 144 let's try that again. 144 square feet maximum under the master sign program. And with these proposed signs, it's 169 square feet. I believe the previous signs were about 209 square feet that were denied.
And the sign that would have been approved on the east-facing building is larger than this, right?
Would have been larger because the maximum sign area under the planning regulations is 1% of the facade area for high-rise signs. And because that facade is substantially larger, it's much longer facade, it would have been a much larger sign.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Applicant like to?
Good evening, Stacy Wells with Sutter Health. Thanks for inviting us back again. I just want to say I think this is a much better proposal. It's one that takes into consideration the concerns of the residents who we heard from and from the commission as well. I'm really grateful to have gone through this process and had a chance to engage not only the commissioners but the residents as well. It's been a real eye-opener, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm really glad that Paul Gerhardt appealed our white sign, because we wouldn't be here today if he hadn't done that. It's taken longer to get here, but in the end we have, I think, what's a win-win situation, and I'm personal thank you to all of you for your patience and for sticking with this, and I hope that you'll approve our sign request tonight. And I'm going to ask our sign consultant, Susan, to address your question about the right side visual.
I'm Susan Bennett with Square Peg. We basically calculate the angles by the depth of the can. The can is the silver side. So we can, you can't really tell from this, but we can do it actually when we're looking at the side of the drawing and we know where the LED is placed after the shop drawings are prepared. We can get a sense of how wide the angle would be for visibility. It's not necessarily that the light shines in that direction, it's just what you can see it from. So we can even, and we also then will go and we'll do a calculation and then we'll actually drive it to make sure that what we physically see, both daytime and nighttime, is the corner of the building coming out that way. And then the red simply is because it's in the water. Nobody's going to see it from there.
Well, as I understand it, or may I address the applicant? As I understand it, the red is an obstructed view. There's a building in front of that. Is that correct?
Exactly. So it wouldn't even matter if you couldn't see it.
So the angle between the left side of the obstructed view and the right side of the best view angle for A seems to be different than it is for B.
Well, when it has to do with when we're driving and we're looking up the side of it. We can see that side of the building because of the way it's angled toward the road. The other one is angled away from the road, so we get less when we're coming back down that way, so we only see that corner. And if I was standing on top of the building, the viewing angle then from me looking out is obstructed. But I can turn, obviously, physically I can see, but the sign faces that. And then if I make the can shallower, my angle widens out. If I make the can deeper, my angle will, for the light, goes a little bit more straight.
So we're talking about the light that you can see, is that correct?
Right, precisely.
Thank you.
And that can be adjusted easily.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Nope. Okay, then are there, if I could just get a show of hands, members of the public who plan to speak on this item? Okay. Come on up, and if we could do a 3-minute limit, that'd be great.
And please sign in on the clipboard over there to the left after you, to the right after you finish speaking.
I'm Chris
We're opening up
Owens,
public hearing, right?
and I think the last time I was here was the art.com sign, which was a few years ago. And I think it's sad that the signage on those high-rises have been such a controversial issue, and I'm glad this is the last building, because all the others already have one. I want to thank Brad for moving us up ahead of the schedule, as much as we would want to hear the EIR. But there is a debate going on CNN, you know, the zoo, about the Republican Party tonight, and I'd like to go back and watch that. I'm probably the only one in this room who's going to be watching it, but it's really entertaining, much more so than anything else on television. Sutter Health contacted the Homeowners Association at PPP, which is how I got involved in it, because I'm on the board, and they had no idea that they needed to deal with us, so it's all solved now. We love the sign. We love the fact that you let them have their logo, and I want to thank you all. And one more thing, if and when there's ever another sign coming up because art.com is leaving or something, would you please reconsider doing them in white, because that is really ugly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members?
Like they don't know who I am.
Well, good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Paul Gerhardt, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. You've heard from me before regarding this sign, and you also know that I live at Pacific Park Plaza. I think you first heard from me regarding the sign back in October of last year, and I've learned a lot since then and since October about the master sign programs, and with the help of Sarah Billings, her help, and I just want to say her professionalism and her freely offering information about the master sign program, so I could understand what was going on over there with the high-rise buildings on the west side of the highway. So interestingly, what I learned through all of this was none of the 6 high-rise signs over there conform to any of the master sign programs. BRG, AAA, Art.com, none of these signs conformed to any of the master sign programs that exist. So I wonder why we have a master sign program. But, you know, that should probably be brought up at a later date, another discussion in the future. And if there's ever a community group or planning commissions that gets together to discuss or reevaluate master sign programs, I would like to volunteer to be in that group. At your last January meeting, you heard my appeal to the staff's decision on the approval of the east-facing Sutter sign, and you all voted no against my appeal. But I've always offered a compromise to a north-facing sign every time I did this. Sutter Health obviously was listening, and I really want to thank Stacy Wells and Sutter Health for contacting me about their new proposal for the north-facing sign, and that if I would support it. And I said, after, you know, talking with Stacy and looking at the drawings, I said, yes, absolutely, that's what I've offered as a compromise all the way along. So I want to thank Stacy for considering the residents at Pacific Park Plaza. I certainly wish some of the other businesses over there would have done the same thing that Stacy and Sutter Health has done. So we get something that we can live with, and of course Sutter gets their logo and their teal color, which is fine. That makes sense. I think it's a win-win for everybody. I've heard from no one at Pacific Park Plaza that objects to this proposal for Sutter Health sign in place of the east-facing sign. So consequently, I urge you to approve the north-facing Sutter Health sign that's going to be before you right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori Carson. I own 2 condominiums in PPP with views of the buildings and the signs. And some of you will recognize me because I spearheaded the art.com brouhaha that we had for a very long time. And I want to, number one, thank Sutter Health and urge you to approve these signs. We are so happy that they worked with us as neighbors. It was the one thing that we really wanted to get from art.com that we never did get. And I too want to make a comment about the Master Sign Program. No one addressed the fact that there are no illuminated signs during the day. However, there's one, art.com, which really is a nuisance to us during the day still. It's huge. It's lit in the day. When it's a foggy day, it's an eyesore. We never have talked about that. So if at some point, because there will be a time that some of you who don't remember art.com will be on here with a sign that's coming up because of a change in tenants, it would be nice to be able to address some of the problems we still have. Those that don't know, a light expert from Arizona named, I can't even remember his name anymore, but anyway, he was sent by the city and installed a light meter into our apartment for a long time. And there were a lot of things that we learned about LED lighting, that it's the LEDs are, they're not illuminating, they illuminate. And one of the things we learned is that white is pretty much the worst color that you can get. It's the brightest, it's the coldest, it's not a color that we can live with. And if you look at the signs, there is not a white sign. Yet the master plan calls for a white sign. It doesn't make any sense to me with the technology and the information. We have pages and pages and pages from this professor that came to work with us on lighting. And I'm sorry, I don't have the knowledge that my husband had. He's no longer here, but you know, we really learned a lot, and yet it wasn't put into effect. Whoever decided on this white, it's not working. So hopefully I agree. If the master plan were revised, you wouldn't have us coming back all the time. So anyway, I urge you to approve it. I urge you at some point to please take a look at the master plan, to look at the lighting. I'm really happy that, you know, Charlie has had that dimmer put on there, that things are dim and we're living with these lights. And thank you to Sutter Health that we don't have to see it. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Nope. Then I will close the public hearing and open up commissioner comments. Okay.
Just like to say very briefly, again, as you've heard from the public, I'd like to commend Sutter Health for doing a great job of not just listening to the comments and the feedback from this dais, but also really setting an example in a lot of ways of partnering with the community and showing all of our corporate partners what that looks like and what a win-win situation looks like. So well done, Sutter Health. Thank you so much, Ms. Wells.
So when we were here in October, and Stacy's already smiling, when we were here in October, I spearheaded the opposition to your original proposal. And since then, we have talked on many occasions, and we are probably as close to being friends as an applicant and a commissioner could be at this point on an item. And Sutter Health is very lucky to have you, Stacy. Your commitment to engaging the community like I and the rest of this commission asked has been commendable. The fact that you have the appellant from the prior master sign proposal, you have the HOA president, and you have a long-standing critic of these signs from the same building who have been here and been the voice of the community on this issue is telling of the effort you put into this. And it's with that that we need to remember that livability in our community is achieved with balance, and that the interests that you and the other tenants in those buildings have can be paired with the interests of the people who live here, and the work that we have here in the testimony today, I think, speaks to that, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
I don't have much to add. I think that it would be great if all of our applicants engaged the community to that level and did it more often than they do, so I appreciate that. Nothing else?
I agree. I think we've gotten a great compromise here, and we should go ahead and approve it.
I think the signs look very appropriate, and it's gratifying to hear about the applicant's efforts to engage the community.
I want to thank my fellow neighbors at PPP for engaging, and with Sutter Health also working with them. I really appreciate the collaboration, as everyone else has said, that there are a way to find a medium ground on most subjects if we all just work together. So I really admire everyone working together as a team and finding a compromise that works for everyone.
And I'd also like to commend the applicant for their hard work. This has nothing to do with the applicant, but I do still stand by earlier conversations and comments that I know we're looking to revisit the city's sign guidelines, but I think for myself, I felt from the beginning that our hands were tied by the master sign program, and that it's very difficult to actually make some of the findings required or it would be very difficult to make some of the findings required to approve the master sign program, but it was approved. That said, the applicant has done a commendable job of coming up with a compromise that I think suits the needs and desires of the community much better than the master sign program itself. And looking forward to moving forward.
Chair Gunkel,
to a future field trip regarding signs.
Yes, so on that note, so before we take a vote and the audience that are concerned about this leave, if I can ask staff a question. At the meeting in October where we denied this sign, we all discussed that the master sign program out there needs review, and we were going to put that on future agendas. So do we have a date of when we're going to revisit that?
I think he said signs generally at that time.
Yeah.
Right, not the master sign program. The master sign program is vested. The only way that can be modified is if the applicant requests a modification to it. The city can't unilaterally impose any modifications to the master sign
my understanding
program.
is that we were going to look at this master sign program and maybe revamp it, because
you might look at it in the context of what you think is appropriate going forward.
Yeah.
You don't have any authority to change it.
We don't have authority to change that program?
No, you do not.
Not for these buildings.
Not for future signs, or change the whole program? And
not for this master sign program.
So the program we have, we're stuck with.
This master sign program was approved by the Planning Commission, and the appeal period has expired, and it's a vested program at this point.
Okay, but we are going to look at the signs throughout the city.
And actually, the city attorney is going to be scheduling a study session with the commission on signs in general in the next few months. There was recently, you may have heard, a sort of a seminal Supreme Court case about signage that has kind of turned the whole area of sign regulations on its head. So we're going to have to revisit our sign regulations anyway. So that will be an opportunity to open up the whole thing and talk about whatever you are looking for in the area of signs.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to add, Commissioner Gunkel, I appreciate your comments, because I still believe that, in the grand scheme of things, when we try to craft a community, even if our hands are tied by the master sign program, signs can be a nuisance if they're not actually reined in. But in the spirit of collaboration, I will actually like to move this item for approval.
I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second.
Thank you. I'm sorry, who made the motion and the second? Bowders moved and Cardoza second. Okay. On the motion, Commissioner Banta?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowders?
Aye.
Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kang?
Aye.
Vice Chair Keller?
Aye.
Chair Gunkel?
Aye.
7 ayes. The application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
All right. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to item 7A, the Sherwin-Williams Development Project Draft EIR.
Chair Gunkel,
Yes.
if I may,
Yes.
before we begin this item,
Do.
I would just like to make a statement for the benefit of the commission and the public here. The item that's before you this evening is a public hearing on the draft environmental impact report for the Sherwin-Williams project. It's an opportunity for the public to give comments to the city on this draft EIR. Written comments may be submitted until the end of the public comment period on the draft EIR, which ends on March 8th. Tonight is an opportunity for people to give oral comments in addition to or instead of written comments. The staff and the commission and the consultants will not be responding to any comments tonight. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to receive comments, and responses to all comments received will be included in the final EIR, which will be prepared following the end of the public comment period on March 8th. So I just want everybody to have the same expectations, which is that there won't be any responses to these comments made by us tonight. We'll just be taking in the comments and we'll be responding after the end of the comment period on March 8th.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there won't be any decision tonight.
Correct. There is nothing before you for decision. This is basically a listening session.
Thank you.
And to add to that, to what Charlie said, I would request that the members of the public make sure that they write their names and sign in, because once we respond to their comments, we respond by each individual. So it's important that we get your names if you come here to speak.
I've seen a number of people with yellow comment cards. Have they given you any? That's not necessary to fill those out. If you have filled them out, you can give them to me and I will give them to the chair to call your names, but you don't have to do that. We just, line up and speak as people approach the podium, but we would ask everybody to sign in on the clipboard to the right over there after you've spoken.
Thank you.
So I would like to introduce our consultant who prepared this document, LSA Associates, and if Judy Malmut, if you could please come in here. She will give a brief presentation in terms of what the EIR is and what the process is, and with that, I'll give it to you.
Okay.
What's this?
To move ahead and back.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Maru. Okay. As Maru mentioned, I'm Judy Malamet with LSA. I'm a principal with LSA in the Berkeley office. We've been the environmental consultants for this project since the beginning. And with me tonight is Emily Gerger. She's a planner with LSA. She's been working with me on the project. And she and I will both be taking copious notes and writing as fast as we can. So we appreciate everybody speaking clearly when the oral comment portion starts. So the purpose of a brief overview of what I'll present is very short, because really what we're here for is to listen and to hear people's comments. So we'll be talking about the purpose of tonight's meeting. I'll give a very brief project overview, purpose of the EIR, the CEQA process and timeline for this project, the draft EIR findings, and then next steps. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to briefly present the project, which is described fully within the draft EIR, Chapter 3, Project Description, and the findings of the draft EIR. And then to receive comments tonight, the 60-day, as Charlie said, the 60-day public comment period began on January 8th. Oral and written comments are being taken this evening as well as through March 8th. Then we'll go off, we'll take all of those comments and everything that we hear, and we'll prepare a response to comments document. And that will be include every written comment that was made and responses to the comments, the CEQA related comments. So again, no decisions are being made tonight. And so the information contained in the draft EIR was prepared by a team of specialists. This is the draft EIR itself, and then there's another, if you printed it out, the technical appendices are another this size. So because the technical consultants and specialists are not here tonight, because the purpose is to listen to comments, we really appreciate getting questions and requests for clarification in writing so that we can send those requests and comments to the specialists and they can provide a very detailed answer in the response to comments document. So the project has 2 parcels associated with it. It's approximately 10 acres total. One of the parcels is a city-owned successor agency parcel. It's 1.5 acres, and it's to the lower side of your screen. I don't have a pointer, but I'll use this little guy. So that's the successor agency parcel. It's right next to the railroad tracks. And then the Sherwin-Williams company-owned parcel is 8.5 acres, and it's the larger parcel here. It's generally bounded by Horton Street, Sherwin Avenue to the south, the railroad tracks to the west, and directly to the north is a Novartis surface parking lot, which is this very gray area right here. It's also called the Rifkin lot, and it's located just immediately adjacent to the project. All of the parcels, both parcels essentially, have been remediated for chemically affected soils and groundwater, and no further action letters have been received from the State Department of Toxic Substances Control. So, and no restrictions were imposed for the types of land uses that can be developed on either site. So both sites are essentially considered remediated, although the monitoring for both sites for the groundwater and other issues will continue indefinitely. One structure does remain on the site. It's building 131. It fronts on Horton Street. It's this white rectangle right there. It's considered a designated Tier 1 architecturally significant building, and it will remain under either option proposed for this project. It's important to note that for the Novartis parcel right there, approximately 788,000 square feet of new laboratory research and development space could be constructed in 2 towers. It's entitled, and it could be constructed right there. However, the development has not occurred in the past 15 years, and it's really the timing of this development remains unknown to both your consultant team as well as to city staff, is my understanding. 2 development scenarios. I mean, one reason this EIR is so thick is that 2 development scenarios, an option A and an option B, were identified and evaluated in the draft EIR. There is one particular item that differentiates these options. In option A, there would be an exchange of property interests, a land swap, and the city-owned parcel would be developed with residential uses, and land to the south would be developed as a public park, which more closely integrates that park use with a more internal and larger open space. In option B, the city would retain ownership of the city-owned parcel, and it would be developed as a public park. Both options include 540 dwelling units, 94,600 square feet of commercial uses, 9,605 square feet of parks and open space, including an extension of the Emeryville Greenway and Bay Trail along the railroad tracks, and both contain structured parking, slightly different amounts.
Before you move on, can I ask a question for clarity? Go back to that slide.
Sure.
In option A, is the lands would swap to the west or to the east? I mean, to the south or to the east? It says here in the south, and I believe that property is to the east of.
Well, perhaps we could. So this is the city-owned parcel up here. So they would be swapping, and this is essentially east
right, and
of
it's
the
not,
railroad tracks.
The document says south?
Right, so the land would, well, I don't have a north-facing arrow on this, but nevertheless, so that if you look at, we'll clarify that, but essentially if you look at where true north is, it's sort of, that's the reason that we're using a north and a south and an east and a west in terms of general direction, but not in terms of true north, I guess I would say. So in option A, here is development that would occur on the land, the city-owned property, and a park would be to the east. And option B, the city park would be on the east, the west side, and this parcel would then be developed. So it's the swap goes that way, if you can see that. If you can also tell, the rest of it really remains essentially the same, everything to the other piece. So the purpose of CEQA is, here we go. So we are tasked with following the state law, and in particular the California Environmental Quality Act. And the purpose of CEQA is to identify and disclose to responsible agencies and the decision makers, in this case the City Council, who are the lead agency for the project, and the public, the project's significant environmental impacts. So the EIR must identify a project's significant environmental impacts, and what those are, according to CEQA, are physical changes in the environment or reasonably foreseen indirect physical changes. And then there's a need to identify ways to mitigate or avoid those impacts, to identify a range of reasonable alternatives that meet basic project objectives and avoid project impacts, and then to inform the public and decision makers of the environmental effects of the project. The EIR does not dictate approval or rejection of a proposed project. It is a disclosure document. And so really the purpose is to make sure that you have the information in front of you in order to make a decision when it comes time to consider that. So the CEQA process and timeline, the notice of preparation was, actually it was December 2014, December 2013. The scoping meeting was held on January 20, that's not correct. Sorry about that. So the notice of preparation was December 2014. The scoping meeting was January 27, 2015. We then went off and prepared the draft EIR. The notice of availability and the draft EIR were made available on January 8th. We're now in the process of the comment period. And the close of the draft EIR public review will be on the 8th. We'll then go off and prepare that response to comments document, as well as a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which is another document required under CEQA. And then we'll be back in front of you in regards to certification hearings and information. So the draft EIR plus the response to comments document are equal to the final EIR, and will be in front of you when you consider the project for approval. So the draft EIR contents, there's an introduction, there's a summary chapter, an executive summary as it were. There's a very extensive project description that identifies both options in detail. There are a number of sections dealing with environmental topics. For each one, there's a setting section. There's then an analysis of the project and an identification of project-related impacts, and then cumulative impacts and mitigation measures to address those impacts. We also have an alternatives chapter, CEQA required assessment conclusions in regards to future use. Who prepared the report, and then the technical appendices. And the technical appendices actually do include the NOP as well as all of the comments that came in, the scoping comments that came in on the NOP, as well as the individual technical reports prepared for the project. So the draft EIR topics that were, this slide shows the ones that were included and evaluated in the draft EIR. It pretty much runs the full gamut. However, there's a few topics you don't see, such as biological resources or mineral resources. And the reason you don't see those is because they were considered, and it was determined that there would be no impact whatsoever on those environmental topics. And that is then disclosed in the chapter in regards to CEQA considerations. And so there is some discussion of those, but they weren't addressed in a full EIR section. So when evaluating the environmental impacts for each topic, first, a significance threshold or criteria of significance is identified for each topic. So it's a threshold over which there would be a significant impact and under which it would be less than significant. If it is significant, then mitigation measures need to be identified. If it's less than significant, then they don't. So the impact analysis was then conducted after the thresholds of significance were determined for each topic. The outcome of the analysis was compared to the significance threshold to determine the level of impact, whether it would be less than significant or significant. And then mitigation measures were identified feasible mitigation measures were identified in an attempt to reduce all of those impacts to a less than significant level, or to disclose where we couldn't reduce them to a less than significant level because simply not feasible mitigation measures were not available. And that comes back again to the draft ER being a disclosure document. Part of it is not to fix every significant impact, if it, we would if it would be possible to do so, but essentially to disclose the decision makers that some significant and unavoidable impacts were identified. And again, impacts are direct physical changes to the environment, and economic and social changes are not physical environmental impacts and generally not evaluated in CEQA documents. So, upon review of the draft ER and the response to comments document, the task of the Planning Commission and City Council will be to determine whether the EIR provided adequate information in regards to the impacts of the project sufficient to allow the City Council to make an informed decision. And I'm not going to read all of this, but essentially that's what this is saying. And that essentially the courts have not looked for perfection, but for adequacy, completeness, and a good faith effort at full disclosure. And that is really the standard that is identified essentially through laws and regulations done through the courts. So for each EIR topic, for option A and option B, and if there was a difference in the impacts for option A or option B, then we identified those specifically and mitigation measures associated with them. But if it was the same impact, same mitigation measures, we also identified that as well. And determined, again, no impact less than significant, significant impacts that could be reduced, or significant and unavoidable impacts. So for the topics that we identified, there was no significant impacts, or they would be less than significant and did not require mitigation. These 6 topics were identified for land use, population, housing, and employment, greenhouse gas emissions, public services and recreation, utilities and infrastructure, and visual resources. We identified significant adverse impacts for the following topics, but also identified mitigation measures that could reduce them to a less than significant level. And we essentially identified 2 types of impacts. Some of them are construction related, such as noise, air quality emissions, dust, chemical spills related to, construction equipment, et cetera. And so those would be considered construction period impacts, and identified specific mitigation measures for those. The operation period impacts are after the project is built and then sort of ongoing. So those would be more like vehicle trips, or, once everybody lives there and works there, what would be those impacts associated with that? So both kinds were. But for all of these topics, we did identify usually pretty standard mitigation measures that could reduce these impacts to less than significant, such as for noise, making sure that you follow the rules of the noise ordinance in regards to the timing of construction, making sure that you have your loud equipment as far away from existing residences, sensitive receptors as possible, et cetera. And that's all spelled out in detail in the EIR. Essentially there are 3 significant and adverse impacts identified. 2 were identified for the topic of transportation and circulation. And they're significant and unavoidable because no feasible mitigation measures were available to reduce them to less than significant levels. So the first of these is the addition of project traffic to Horton Street north of 53rd Street, which is a designated bicycle boulevard, under the cumulative conditions could increase traffic volumes by more than 2% on a roadway where volumes already exceed the volume threshold for a bicycle boulevard. And this impact would occur with either option A or option B. And to give you a little bit of background, because the Novartis site development is entitled, but it's not known when it would be developed. We did 3 different scenarios for the traffic analysis. The first was existing conditions with the project, so that would be adding the project traffic essentially to the existing conditions. The second one was a near term with project conditions, and that was all the projects, feasible or likely projects in the pipeline or that were known to occur or were funded in the next 5 to 10 years. And so that was the near-term analysis. And then, except for Novartis. And then the cumulative analysis was all of those near-term projects plus Novartis. So because Novartis is adjacent to this property and because it's a very large amount of development that's been entitled, a lot of this particular impact really gets triggered in the cumulative condition, but not in the near-term condition and not in the existing condition, which I
Are you saying that it's less than significant in the categories other than cumulative then? That's how it comes out. It's only cumulative.
Only cumulative.
Is significant. Okay.
Right. And we just decided that this would be the best way. It makes for a very long traffic analysis and traffic section. However, because the Novartis project is not known when it would occur or if it would occur, it just didn't seem feasible to do an analysis that did include Novartis and did not include Novartis, so that you would know. And then in regards to this amount of 2% increase on a roadway where the volumes already exceed the volume threshold, that is a significance criteria. So if the project would contribute 2% more than what is already on that street, then it would be a significant impact. If it was 1.9%, then it would not be. So that's the threshold for that particular impact. So the second significant and unavoidable impact is that with either option A or option B at the San Pablo Avenue 40th Street intersection, vehicle queues, which is where you line up to make a turn, for some movements are projected to exceed the available storage in the cumulative with project condition. And again, it's cumulative, not near term and not existing. And then it goes on in terms of which of those queuing movements are the ones that would be, too many cars would be queuing up to make that turn, then there is available space in the queue line. The second significant and unavoidable impact
You have a question for staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you go back one slide? I have one more question for you on that.
Sure.
On the first of the significant mitigation measures, just to clarify, you have a 2% threshold. So in the near term and the current circumstances, I know that 2% is the metric you're using. What are the percentages of vehicle traffic increase on the thoroughfare north of 53rd? You know,
and that would be, no, I'm not the traffic person. And
I'm just wondering if it's like 1.9 and so it didn't make the list as significant, but it's right below it, or if we're talking like it's not registering.
There is a lot of discussion in the traffic analysis in regards to the addition of traffic to the current condition of the bicycle boulevard and the traffic, as well as the policies associated with the bicycle boulevards and guidelines. But at this point, and the policies are different in regards to the volumes depending on what segment you're in. So it gets very complicated, unfortunately, very quickly. So I don't know off the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
But I do know that that information is definitely available.
Since we came back to that page, if we're looking at this, the 2% strictly because this is a bicycle boulevard, if this was no longer bicycle boulevard and we put in bike lanes or we made sharrows, how would that change this?
I don't have an answer for that either, although it's an excellent question.
Well, that would require a general plan amendment because Horton Street, among other streets in the city, is designated as a bicycle boulevard in the street system of the general plan. So you can't just put bike lanes on it and say it's not a bike boulevard anymore. You'd have to amend the general plan and the ped bike plan.
Thank you, Charlie. All right. So the other significant adverse impact was associated with cultural resources. And In this case, it has to do with ground disturbing activities associated with the project could unearth unknown Native American human remains, and we know there have been human remains unearthed in the vicinity of the project, although not on the project site. And the draft ER does identify mitigations to measures to reduce potential impacts to Native American human remains by ensuring that the treatment of such remains be done in consultation with the appropriate descendants and in accordance with state law. And for a number of projects, that would actually be sufficient to reduce this to a less than significant impact, to follow the rule, follow the laws, essentially, and to work very closely with the most likely descendants. However, in some instances, we know that descendants may prefer that remain in situ and not be excavated or removed. And then, due to the profound importance that ancestral remains have for the local Ohlone community, removal of such remains may represent a significant unavoidable impact, should they be found, even after implementation of mitigation measures. And so we identified this as a significant and unavoidable impact.
Is the concern of the Ohlone that the remains be moved at all or be removed from the site?
That would, since no remains are known to be there or have ever been there, and this is a heavily remediated site for hazardous materials, and so there's been a lot of soil removal and substrate changes in order to contain groundwater issues and things like that. It's very unlikely that there are any human remains on the site. It's just in the case that there might be. So it's just a consideration concern.
I just want to clarify on that question. Has there been any comment or feedback solicited from the Ohlone community who could provide anything?
There is outreach that was done by the cultural resource folks in regards to this project as we went through our research. And I believe all of that information should be in one of the technical appendices. Emily, can you? So it's a matter, of course, when we do our analysis, and then when we go to the repositories of the information, you have to essentially, there are rules about signing up to use the information at the different repositories. And so the draft ER is certainly available for comment, but we have not entered into any kind of relationship or discussion at this point.
But how does that differ from what outreach you did? Can you specify what outreach?
The outreach was mostly to make sure that it was known that this draft ER was occurring and being prepared, essentially, and saying, do you have concerns? Or, it was the same notice. It's the same scoping process, essentially, that went on in regards to all of the scoping process for the draft ER itself.
So there was no distinctive notice that was given to folks in the Ohlone community about what was going on. Is that correct?
I am not sure, but I don't believe so. No. But I would have to go into the files and look for that specific information. But
thank you. Commissioner Bowder.
Just have a clarifying question for you. You talked about the remediation in light of the cultural resources issue. Were both parcels remediated, or was it both parcels were? Thank you.
Yeah, and both have letters of no additional work needed.
Okay, thank you.
And clearance for any kind of land use to be placed on them. So the EIR CEQA guidelines require the analysis of a range of reasonable alternatives to the project or to the location of the project that would feasibly attain most of the project's basic objectives and avoid or substantially lessen any of the significant effects of the project. The range of alternatives required in an EIR is governed by a rule of reason that requires the EIR to set forth only those alternatives necessary to permit a reasoned choice. And CEQA states that an EIR should consider alternatives whose effect cannot be should not consider alternatives whose effect cannot be ascertained and whose implementation is remote and speculative. So we did come up with 4 alternatives. I know this is a terrible slide with way too many words, but the next slide is much better because it just breaks it down into numbers. But the first slide is the first alternative we looked at was existing base zoning and general plan development, which assumes the project site would be developed as allowed under the current general plan and zoning designations. It would result in about 270 dwelling units and 8,000 square feet of retail, 74,000 square feet of office. The reduced density alternative includes 3 variants, which, the variants kind of all move uses and around the site, but all would have 378 dwelling units, 12,000 square feet of retail, 5,500 square feet of office, and 48,300 square feet of commercial. And then the Lennar alternative includes 2 variants, both resulting in 532 dwelling units, 8,000 square feet of retail ground floor commercial use, 74,000 square feet of office and parking. And then the no project alternative, which in some cases would be considered the existing base zoning general plan development, but in this case it was just that it would assume that the site would ultimately not remain vacant. It would be like no development ever would occur there if the proposed project were not approved, but a different project would generally, consistent with city policies and regulations, would at some time come forth and may or may not be the same as the existing base zoning general plan development alternative. So this provides just really a very quick summary of the principal characteristics. So as you can see, the proposed project is at the top. It would have the most office and commercial, and the new jobs, dwelling units, and new residents. The smallest is the existing base zoning, general plan development, and then the next smallest is the next smallest is the reduced density alternative, and then the Lennar alternative. So they're all a little bit different. The Lennar alternative is very similar to the proposed project. So, which brings us to next steps. So again, written comments are being accepted through March 8th. And then we'll prepare written responses to those. We'll complete the response to comments document, and then we'll be back with this project in regards to the response to comments document, the MMRP, and then the draft findings. And then what would be considered for certification is the draft EIR, the response to comments and revisions to the draft EIR, and the MMRP. And then we expect project approval or the project to come back and certification sometime in summer of 2016. And written comments go to Maru at her email or at via snail mail. So at this point, that's my presentation, and now I believe it would be open for your comments. I'll ask Charlie.
Well, I guess are there any questions for staff? No? Okay. And Charlie, did you have anything to add?
No.
Okay.
This time.
Thank you. Can I get a show of hands how many people here are here to speak on this item? Okay. So, in the interest of everyone getting their comments recorded and also getting this meeting over at some point in time tonight, could we limit public comment to 2 minutes on this item? Charlie?
It's up to you. It's up to the commission.
Yes.
Okay, you should remind everyone.
Yes, and obviously written comments can be submitted and they'll be responded to. So then that said, I think instead of everybody coming up popcorn style, let's just kind of go down the rows starting on this side, the gentleman who already is up, and we'll just kind of move down the rows on this side and then switch over to this side. So now we're opening this up to public hearing, opening up the public hearing on this item.
Good evening. My name is Rudolph Brooks. I'm a resident of Emeryville, and I work in construction. And my concerns about this Sherwin-Williams project is the contaminants that's in the water, soil, and air, and how this company is going to try to mitigate these issues, and also what this project is going to bring as a benefit to the workers in this community. And from what I've seen, this site is contaminated with benzene, soil vapors, petroleum in the soil, contaminated groundwater above safe levels, even after part of the site has been cleaned up. And the city needs to, and the Planning Commission needs to actually require testing of the soil, groundwater, and figure out what's in it, disclose the level of cleanup that is still needed, tell us what protections will be put in place to eradicate this. Otherwise, myself and others like me might be harmed by these in the future. And I say you should say no to this incomplete study until we know how much more cleanup is needed and how many people like me will be kept safe. And I know this is a big development, and it's probably the biggest one I'll ever come before you guys, but it's very important that we find out what all of this is before we go any further. And I say also I need to know more details about the construction of the park and the impact of the building of the city park, because I want to be able to bring my grandchildren there so that they can play and not be in harm's way. And I would say no to this right now. And the city needs to go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. And just to remind you, we're not going to be making any decisions tonight. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can write in any additional comments that you have, and the city will respond to them. Thank you. It's going down? All right.
Hi, my name is Francis Rodriguez, and I am 31 years old. I am an Emeryville resident. I've lived here for 2 years, and I have no future plans of moving out of Emeryville. I love this area, and I myself work in the trades. I'm a sheet metal worker, and as it is working on a construction site, there's already many hazards that you have to deal with, falling objects, taking falls, and so forth. So, like he mentioned himself, having contaminants on a construction site, which a normal person, can detect just by working there, is a hazard which I would not want to have to work with, and the future, effects of that. And also being an Emeryville resident, if this development happened as it was shown on the board, I wouldn't want to have to go to a park, because I, being an Emeryville resident, do, walk on the trails here and there and go to the parks. And, I think that further studies should take place before anything goes into effect to make sure that, this job is done right and properly, so that no workers or residents of the city of Emeryville are put in harm's way unnecessarily, when we have the technology to make sure that there's no contaminants such as benzene or the soil vapors, as he mentioned earlier. And I think this should definitely be done the right way. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. Speak into the
Sign in.
microphones and sign in when you're finished. So.
Good evening. My name is Jason Gumatau. I'm a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 595. I appreciate you listening to the concerns about the Sherwin-Williams project. As said, it is a large development, and as residents, we're just concerned about what the developers aren't doing and whether or not they're doing enough to mitigate the impacts of this project. As it sounded, there are some details that are missing, and I just want to ask, what exactly is Lennar doing to plan around the improvements on the streets, and will it in fact be using cleaner burning construction equipment etc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Angelita Martin. I'm a member of the IBEW Local 595. I am a Berkeley, Oakland, California, Bay Area American native. I've never lived in Emeryville, but I know that a lot of Oakland and Berkeley residents shop here. We love it. We're proud and happy to be a part of Emeryville. I'm here to support my brothers and sisters and fellow tradesmen with this construction, and if they say there aren't any details, and a lot of details are missing, I trust them because I haven't heard any, or I don't know of any, and I don't want to work in conditions that are unsafe. And yeah, Emeryville has a responsibility to do the right thing, and that's find out more about where we're going to work, where our families are going to be, how they're going to be exposed. We're not going anywhere. We love Emeryville, Oakland, Berkeley, you know, and it's important that you guys take under consideration, you know, the communities around Emeryville. Even though, you know, Emeryville's so small and stuff, we do, you know, support our workers, and we want our workers to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the second row?
Good evening, Commissioners. Richard Grossetti, Grossetti Environmental Consulting, retained by the 45th Street Artists Cooperative. We previously submitted a comment letter on the notice of preparation, and a lot of the items that we identified there have not been addressed in the EIR, so we'll be submitting another detailed letter. A couple of major points. One is that the EIR is very generic in its discussions. It's almost program level. It doesn't get into detail to the way an EIR on a project of this scale should. Another major issue is the failure to address the infeasibility of the project. The project cannot meet the bonus requirements, given what it says on page 469, that it will not include affordable housing. Therefore, it absolutely can't meet the bonus requirements. Therefore, it's not a feasible project. And you probably should go back to this drawing board and start over with a smaller project, if that's what's going on here. That also affects alternatives, because you can't have alternatives to an infeasible project. They need to be alternatives to a feasible project. There's a lot of conclusatory analyses without evidence in the document. There's also some analyses that are done pretty well, but the conclusions don't match the analyses. There's the project description is just not detailed enough. It's missing, for example, the mix and model of number of bedrooms for each unit, and then without that, you can't get an accurate project population. Without the accurate population, you can't do accurate traffic studies or air quality studies or any of the other studies. There's no foundation design discussed in the project description. Without that, you can't address these folks' issues with respect to stirring up of contaminated materials. There's a lot of policy and plan non-compliances that we'll address in our letter. There's a number of problems with the cumulative impact analyses that we'll get through in our letter. Specific analyses that were requested with respect to noise and dust and how they affect the artist cooperative, who have to have opening windows, are excluded from the document.
Thank you.
I can go on and on and on.
Well, you can go on and on
For
and
one
on
more
in
minute,
writing,
I could have.
and the city will respond. So thank you very much. And I do encourage everyone to write in as well.
He needs to sign in.
Oh yes, and if you could sign in, please.
Sharon Wilshire, 1420 45th Street, Community Liaison for the 45th Street Artists Cooperative. I'll just hit the bullet points because it's now 2 minutes. I believe that the baseline traffic counts done in 2015, I believe it's flawed and underrepresented. Horton Street only runs from Mandela to 62nd Street, and in 2015 there were several anomalies in the use of at least 4 major structures between 45th and Stanford. Any traffic to and from these buildings during the traffic count would not have been captured of the usual traffic from these sites. These sites should be identified as to location, size, and use, and explain how traffic to and from these buildings are treated in the draft DIR. A minor thing, page 71 in the diagram, existing land uses. Blue Star Corner is not identified. I think my neighbors at Blue Star would like to be on the map. And if you're going, I'm just thinking about in terms of proposed land uses, maybe I missed it, but what about the Transit Center and Emery Station West on Horton Street? In terms of what I understand now as near-term and cumulative, a couple of other things, the Banker Marks building on Horton Street, the building at 40th and Horton, but I'll have a whole list of things that I think should be included there. These sites all need to be included in the analysis. And lastly, still on traffic and circulation, there's an analysis of traffic flow in and out of the proposed site, but nothing analyzed in terms of traffic flow out of existing uses on Horton. The 45th Street Artist Co-op has a secured surface parking lot exiting onto Horton directly across from the project. We have 2 buildings, 56 studios, and approximately 66 surface parking spaces. There are other driveways on Horton Lofts, Griffles, Pete's. Will any of the Sherwin-Williams driveways or new streets conflict with egress and turning points from these existing Horton driveways? Please identify all of these driveways and evaluate any conflict or effect on existing driveways. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, I'm Chris Peterson. I'm with the 45th Street Artists Cooperative. I mean, I didn't have to do it. Sharon didn't try and really cut this down. The majority of the co-op members live and work in their homes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have no air conditioning and no air filtration, so we really rely on our windows and skylights for ventilation. It leaves us very vulnerable to the construction fallout. We also went through the remediation, and we know what it takes to make the project good and more livable for us. I didn't see a lot of that in this EIR. Reading the EIR, it seems as though the concerns for the air quality and the noise for there are 5 live-work buildings surrounding this project, and it seemed as though the fact was not taken into consideration. The construction of this starts at the third quarter of 2016. It goes for 34 months, which takes us well into 2019. Yet at the beginning of Appendices C, the emission summaries for the data listed on both the mitigated and the unmitigated constructions shows only 2016 and 2017. That's only 15 months of the project. There are emission breakdowns later in this section, but there was nothing in 2018 and 2019 that paralleled the data in these first summaries, and it seems as though we really need that data to go have that completed. It seemed, when I really researched that section, it seemed like there was data that was completely missing. The fact that the EIR is based on an outdated bonus point structure should be a reason alone to have this redone from the ground up, but it's compounded by long lists of other shortcomings that we'll have to put into writing. And as I read this document, the LTS, which is supposed to stand for less than significant, came up again and again and again, and it led me to believe it really stands for let them suffer.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gary Grimm, and I'm speaking on behalf of my wife, Ann Holsbury, and myself. We're members of the 45th Street artist community, and my wife has been working in her painting studio here for about 30 years. She has an interior studio with large windows that are usually open during the daylight hours to increase the natural light and provide ventilation, which is important to her art. We're interested in seeing an effective project being developed on this site that improves the quality of the neighborhood for all the neighbors and all the residents of Emeryville. However, we're very disappointed with the incompleteness and the lack of factual support for conclusions in the draft EIR relating to potential environmental impacts, both during and post-construction, as well as inadequate mitigation measures being described. I'll provide written comments by the deadline, but let me just point out 2 things in the area of noise. First of all, the draft concludes that substantial increase of noise to nearby residents from stationary sources could occur is a result of traffic noise due to the delivery and unloading activities, parking lot activities, and mechanical equipment noise. However, the loading and unloading locations have not been established yet. The parking lot activities and mechanical equipment noise have not been quantified for purposes of this analysis. And also, the proposed mitigation does not quantify how much the standard noise reduction procedures will reduce noise. Thus, with these shortcomings, we think that noise impact 2 is not factually supported and should be expanded. The second one I'll mention is noise impact 3, which concludes that project construction activities could cause a substantial temporary increase in the ambient noise levels.
Thank you.
And there's lack of support for this also.
Thank you. If you could sign in. And is there anyone else in the second row who would like to speak? So we'll move to the third row. Is there anyone in the back row there who'd like to speak on this item? Come on up.
Good evening. I'm John Demerit, 45th Street Artists Cooperative. I'm the current president of our board of directors. I'm going to echo a few of the sentiments and concerns expressed by my neighbors, Chris Peterson and Gary Grimm there. I just want to say a few words about some very real quality of life issues that we at the co-op and our neighbors in the larger residential neighborhood surrounding the Sherwin-Williams site are faced with in the construction and implementation of this massive development. We are concerned that the EIR does not adequately address these concerns. We have been living and working in our buildings for 30 years. Our buildings are old factories retrofitted to serve our needs as artists. Our ventilation system is our open windows. Our light comes through our windows and skylights. Our buildings are permeable and exposed. When a proposed 32 to 34 month long construction project happens across the street from us, we can't go home to escape it because we live and work in our homes 24 hours a day. As listed in the noise section of the EIR, the majority of construction equipment produces between 80 and 96 decibels at a range of 50 feet. I measured today, and my studio is about 40 feet from the site, the perimeter of the Sherwin-Williams site. And also, according to the EIR document, that's equivalent to between 80 and 96 decibels is equivalent to standing next to a food blender at 3 feet and being inside a New York City subway on either end of that range. The EIR gives such scant recognition to the fact that 70% of residencies surrounding the Sherwin-Williams site are identified as live work, so we're not the only ones who are going to be affected by this construction period. For instance, on the noise mitigation measures given in the noise section, one of the conclusions is that the general construction noise shall be limited on weekdays from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's 11 hours a day. And on weekends from 8 to 5. The rest of the directives are vague and opaque, like using smaller and quieter equipment, turning off idling equipment, placing noisy equipment for it.
Thank you.
We'd like to see more data on those.
Thank you very much. Oh yeah, and if you could sign in, sorry.
I am Nora Bobbles. I live at the 45th Street Co-op on Horton Street, and I live right across from the existing building, Building A. We need the EIR to add a visual simulation and a cumulative visual simulation from 45th Street and Horton, which is not included in the EIR, because we're wondering how this project will affect the scenic vistas from this viewpoint. And then also the shadow study claims that the project will not affect the 45th Street Co-op as a future solar collector, but the loss of light from this massive project will certainly majorly affect our work as artists. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Germain, co-chair of PARC, which is Park Avenue Residents Committee. And I spent 20 years on the Planning Commission, tried to read several EIRs and just sort of blurred out about midnight. And so I stopped reading the whole thing and started reading things like the project proposal, the summary of impacts and mitigation measures, and the environmentally superior alternative, which in this case, in the EIR, states that the environmentally superior alternative is the one that's submitted by the artist co-op. That alternative reduced the density by approximately 30%, moved the mass of the project north adjacent to massing that is already entitled and approved on the Griffles site, extended the existing street system into the site instead of creating additional dead-end streets, lowered the peripheral buildings along Horton Street and Sherwin Street to comply with the Park Overlay District guidelines. But that environmentally superior alternative cannot be built. Actually, none of these can be built. The rules changed during the production of this EIR. The goalposts were moved when the city changed its regulations to only allow bonus points with the addition of affordable housing. All of these scenarios and all of these alternatives require bonus points to be built. The document does not acknowledge the requirements of the new regulations and does not describe a project that complies with the new regulations. The EIR is flawed and needs to be redone. It evaluates projects that cannot be built, and the developer needs to propose a project that complies with the city guidelines and the city's mandates before submitting to the EIR process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the rear row over there who'd like to speak? No? Okay, then we're going to move to the front row here.
Hi, and thank you very much, Planning Commissioners, for your service on the Commission. I appreciate that it's a lot of work. My name is Kevin Kellogg. I live at 45th Street and Horton on the southeast corner. I'm a member of the Park Committee representing the Horton Lofts. I think this project is a good project. It's strategically important for the region, and it's understandable why this project is coming to us at this time in history. I think the project proponents have the resources and expertise to create a model of sustainable, equitable infill development. So there are great possibilities with this project. That said, I also feel that the draft EIR is significantly lacking in some critical areas. Mostly, it omits material necessary to inform decision-making and public participation. There are a lot of analysis just left unsaid in this project. The traffic study is probably the most obvious. A number of street segments and intersections were not even analyzed. The entire southern routes out of Emeryville are not evaluated at all. There appear to be bugs in the methodologies used to determine the scale and intensity of the impacts, and it also fails to provide details for meaningful and effective mitigation that can provide us with a level of security that those mitigation measures will actually be effective in mitigating the impacts that they are there for. Impacts to visual resources, I believe, are inadequately analyzed, and that they do not analyze the impact to visual and historic resources on Horton or Sherwin streets that have Tier 1 contributing historic structures. The Park Avenue District Plan has as a key goal preserve the district's unique historic. Okay, time's up. I'll submit my written comments. Thank you
so much. Yes, indeed. Do. Oh, yes, and if you could sign in. Are there any others in the front row here who would like to speak?
Hi, Judy Timmel, representing Residents United for Livable Emeryville. If you don't know who we are a group of residents from all over the city, so our concerns are not so much that of proximity, but for the value or the lack of value the project would have for all the residents of the city. We believe that this EIR could not be approved as currently written, primarily because it lacks conformity to not only the 2009 general plan, the 2013 zoning ordinance, and the Park Avenue District Plan, as well as the family-friendly design guidelines that were approved at the end of last year. in terms of our specific concerns, we will be submitting written commentary, but I'll just give a few highlights. In terms of maintenance of Horton Street as a bicycle boulevard, this is a priority for us. This project, EIR assumes that that will not be possible. We're concerned that there's no intention for affordable housing, nor even a mention of family-friendly housing. We're concerned the maintenance for the archaeological cultural resources, we find it unbelievable that since there were hundreds of remains found just across the railroad tracks from this site and Bay Street, that this site would not have any of those issues. This project will, as stated, not contribute to the quality of life of the residents. It will not improve the ratio of open space to resident. It may cause traffic sufficient to eliminate 3 bicycle boulevards, provide only luxury living spaces without regard to affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the front row on the side who would like to speak? No? We'll go to the second row.
Hello, my name is Brian Horde, and I live in the Blue Star Corner section of Emeryville, and I've been a resident on that block since about 1999. So we lived there when Sherwin-Williams was still in operation. It was taken down, and we had a proposal early on. The proposal that was presented early on is what's in this EIR. It's a very old proposal. And we're curious why, after all of the effort that the community put into coming up with some alternatives, that those are the plans that are still in this EIR. I believe that the changes that the community has put forth would give us different results. There's different traffic patterns, many different things. I think that this is a flawed report for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Rutter. I'm a resident at Blue Star Corner, and I actually have a question about process. Would that be appropriate at this time, Charlie? Instead of
Sure.
Brad?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm curious, since the proposal has gone through by LSA, talked about a timeline, and the response after this meeting and forum and written comments is that the EIR is resubmitted as the draft plus the response to comments, but we've heard a lot of significant concerns about just the basic findings. And I'd be concerned that just a comment response would be insufficient to address the community concerns. What would be the process of going back to the step and having a full redraft of the EIR, and what would that renewed timing look like, since that would be seemingly a response to the community needs?
I think maybe what we'll do is we'll wait till all the public comments or public comments happen, and then we'll go back to the staff consultant, and she can answer your questions and any other remaining questions.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the second row who would like to speak on this item? How about the third row?
Good evening, planning commissioners, and thank you for letting us speak. I've lived in the Artist Co-op since 1979, and plan to age in place. The interesting thing for me is that from reading this EIR, I don't have a good sense of what the shadows cast would be, where the noisy equipment on the top of the building would be placed, and who would it be near. We had a similar situation with Chiron years ago, where they were supposed to put it over diagonally away from the co-op, and it was then put right next to the co-op, and it caused us years and years of agony and difficult negotiations to finally get a resolution. It's still not perfect. So it's really important where the shadows are going to be. Will we be able to have real light to do our artwork with? Will my neighbor who's has a lung disease, will she even be able to breathe? So all of these things are so important, and I don't think they're well done, and the lack of affordable housing is a slap in the face of the current council. So I really think you guys need to come in strong and ask for the detail and a true picture, a true model of what this would look like. We cannot see it based on the level of generality and the lack of detail. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
What was your name, Miss?
Sorry. My name is Archana Horsting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Louise Stanley, and I live at Ground Zero at the corner of 45th and Horton. And I have been breathing diesel for 23 years that comes in my windows. I had a loading dock right across the street from Sherwin-Williams. They would park their cars, their trucks, and keep the motors going. And I breathed their fumes for all this time. I'd have to go out every 45 minutes and knock on the door and ask them to turn off the motor. And I have sarcoidosis as a result of that. And the street, Horton, is a very narrow street, so any fumes and exhaust just hover. And we all have open windows, and we're all working in there day in, day and night. So I hope that you would reconsider everything we've talked about. I don't. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't start the timer till you're ready.
Thank you, Charlie.
Where's the timer?
I've attended meetings with neighbors every day this week.
I'm going to start the timer if you're going to start talking.
You want me to put this? I'll do it when I get there. And what strikes me, first of all, is that we are counting on this report being accurate and unbiased, because we are not equipped to analyze this report. We're just citizens. The Artists Co-op has retained a consultant, good for them, but the number of people in this community who are Googling MXD plus to figure out if it's appropriate to apply to this project, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because they spend so much time justifying it. But my point is, we're counting on you guys or the city to have an unbiased approach to analyzing this stuff. I don't know enough about city planning to know about the impact of traffic. What I do know is this. I walk this neighborhood several hours a day, every day, and this is what it looks like. It's two-story, 1- and 2-story buildings. The biggest thing in this area is the Emery Street lofts. When the Emery Street lofts built an additional piece, they made it 2 stories to fit in with the neighborhood. 2 stories, it fits in with the neighborhood. This project, let me quote you what it says. The addition of 5 new buildings and the rehabilitation of the Sherman-Williams building will not degrade the existing visual characteristics of the area. It talks about 75-foot buildings along Sherman Street. It says the proposed project will rely on a less than significant impact related to visual character. Most of the neighborhood's buildings are 4 to 8 stories tall. Really? The Emery Warehouse Loft is the tallest building in the district at 73 feet. Well, here's what the Park Avenue District Plan says about our building. Does that look like 75 feet to you? It's a 3-story building. It's got a penthouse, 3 units on top.
Thank you.
They're calling that 75 feet.
Thank you.
So please, this is just inadequate and deeply flawed report, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much.
Please state your name for the record, please.
Mike McConnell.
Thank you.
My name is Edith Bresnahan, and I am a longtime resident of the 45th Street Artists Co-op. My studio has windows facing Horton Street, and I have lived through several construction projects from Sherwin-Williams over the years. One of these projects was so poorly handled that I could not be in my studio at all during the daylight or working hours because of the noise, the dust, and the fumes from the trucks and the machinery, both on the street and on the site. My home during the daylight hours was simply not inhabitable, and this lasted for weeks. I am very concerned that Horton Street not be used for the removal or the delivery of materials for this project. It is all the more serious this time because this development is planned for 3 to 5 years and could make our neighborhood both unhealthy and extremely uncomfortable during this time. The EIR does not consider this impact in its document. It states that people will be in these buildings for a period of time to either live or to work there. But in fact, we have the right, and we do live and work in these buildings for 24 hours a day. The windows in my studio, like many of the buildings surrounding the site, are metal sash single pane glass. And if you look from the side, you can see daylight.
Thank you.
It is extremely important that there be good oversight for this project because of the time duration.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else on the back row over here who would like to speak to this item? Okay, that said, we're going to close public hearing.
Ask these people.
Oh. Okay.
Hi, Tim Curran, 4250 Horton Street. I submitted an alternative for the EIR, and unfortunately I didn't meet the rule of reason. I didn't manage to make a reasoned choice, and I guess it was remote and was speculative. My alternative provided a connection to Halleck Street, which could have changed the circulation of the traffic dramatically, but it wasn't reviewed by the EIR. I don't quite understand. I mean, it even seemed like it might alleviate the major problem, one that was a significant impact, which was the 2% increase at Horton Street, but it wasn't considered, didn't pass the rule of reason, I guess. It's in the dump folder of the alternatives that didn't make it in the report. You can find it there. I'll find out later. I'm sure I get a letter as to why I didn't pass. But it was a sincere alternative to the very constrained site, triangular site, which has been perplexing the Planning Commission and the City Council about how to get the traffic out of there. But no, the Lennar alternative made it into the EIR. Some other alternatives made it in, but mine didn't. I'll find out why. Probably won't really matter. Another thing, it was really nice to hear some other members of the community talk about working on the site. Good, sincere efforts during the remediation of Sherwin-Williams, including the Federal Department of Toxic Substance Control, DTSC, which I talk to regularly. Really assured me that don't worry, we've got air monitors, so we're taking care of it. I read every day how it was working just fine. One day I went out and just talked to microanalytics labs of Emeryville, found out how to take a proper sample, took a little dust sample from the road, took it over there, and what do you know? Above the threshold requirements for arsenic. My daughter's 8 years old.
Thank you. Yes, if you could sign in. And sorry for missing you guys over here. Obviously, I need a new peripheral vision test. Is there anyone else over here who would like to speak? No? Okay, then we are going to close the public hearing. And we are going to just run down really quickly. Maybe first, if staff could respond to the one question that was raised.
The response to comments document, actually it's a bit of a misnomer. In addition to copies of all comments received and responses to all comments, the response to comments document also will include any necessary revisions to the draft EIR itself. So if any portions of the draft EIR need to be rewritten or reanalyzed or whatever, that will all be included in the response to comments document, which in combination with the draft EIR will constitute the final EIR.
Thank you. And does that answer your question? Okay.
Charlie, can I ask a question in relation to that? So if they find that there are half the discrepancies that the community tonight feels that there are, what is that going to do? Is that going to make a wholesale revamping of the EIR? Is it going to delay the whole process of writing it? And then when it's changed that way, does that change the comment period, that now that there's something different, people may want to comment on that? What does that do to the whole EIR and process?
It doesn't change the process. The idea is that an EIR is first published as a draft so that people can review it and have a chance to comment on it and bring up issues such as people have done tonight. Then the final EIR will contain responses to all of those issues, and if there's any major rewriting that needs to be done, it will be included. The final EIR will be made available to the public prior to its certification and approval of the project. I believe there is a public hearing on certification of the final EIR. At least, it's certainly, the project cannot be considered until after the final EIR is certified. The public will have an opportunity to comment on the final EIR before it is certified. And I would note that because this is a planned unit development that requires the approval of the City Council, even though this hearing to accept comments is being conducted by the Planning Commission, it's ultimately the City Council that must certify the final EIR. It would be reviewed by you first, and you would make a recommendation to the council. Then they will have to be the ones to actually certify it, and there will be an opportunity for the public to comment on the final EIR both at the Planning Commission and at the council before it's certified.
Could you give us a little clarification on the comments that were made about the rules changing while the EIR was in process, about the requirements on affordability, the requirements on family-friendly housing, what that does to the population generation? What kind of impact is that going to have on the process?
Well, that's a little difficult to respond to. I would note that prior to the revised rules, the project under the former rules, when the application was submitted, did require a development bonus. And in fact, it required the maximum development bonus of 100 points. The rules at that time did not include affordable housing as part of the bonus, but it did require the bonus and community benefits. The rules now would require affordable housing in addition to other community benefits in order to earn those 100 bonus points. I would say that typically, in terms of traffic generation, the standard of practice there is to use the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, and that, of course, is modified for an urban environment because it's primarily based on suburban studies. But Farron Piers, who is the traffic consultant here, does take into account the urban environment. To my knowledge, the trip generation rates for residential uses don't break it down in so fine grain as to number of bedrooms and so forth. It's just an estimate, average estimate per residential unit. And that's how we've conducted, to my knowledge, that's how we've conducted every previous traffic study on any residential development. I would also note that in terms of the level of detail that some of the commenters are looking for, this is a PUD. It's a preliminary development plan, master plan for the site. So it has to analyze the biggest envelope that could be built on the site. But it doesn't necessarily get down into family-friendly floor plans and things like that. Not at this level, not for this EIR. I would also note that the public market development that's underway right now, that was recently, most of the final development plans for those buildings have been approved by the Commission, is also a PUD. And we also did an EIR for that project. And it's a fairly high-level document. It did cover all of the major potential areas of impact that could result from that project, but does not get down into the design of the individual units.
So, I agree with you. I just wanted a clarifying question on that point, and not into the weeds on those details, but the one comment from Mr. Grassetti, I believe, was here about the current draft EIR does not do the traffic study or any other pieces with any component of affordable units in it, though, right? So people who would, it's just straight up units, is that correct? It's not analyzed as...
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And is it appropriate to comment to ask for that to be analyzed?
Well, I'm not aware that their ITE has any trip generation rates for affordable units as opposed to market rate units. They might, but I would expect that those trip generation rates would probably be lower. And what you want to analyze in an EIR is the worst case scenario. So in that sense, if that assumption is correct, that affordable units do have a lower trip generation rate, then it makes sense to analyze the entire project as if it were market rate, because that's the worst case scenario.
Okay. So I'll leave it to LSA, but the California Housing Partnership Corporation did an analysis on that very issue this last year in a report on how developing affordable units near mass transit structures reduces the reliance on carbon-based emission vehicles, because people who live within a quarter mile of a mass transit system or bus are more likely to use that and not use a vehicle. So to me, it's germane to the question of its nexus with the bike boulevard, the GHG reducing elements that it proposes, as well as its other features that we've all heard from the community. So I would like to see that examined.
We can certainly look at that in the response to comments document, but again, I would say that we would really want to do it based on the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I just want to see the comparison for what it actually changes, if it changes anything or not.
Are there any other questions for staff?
Charlie, is it correct that the EIR consultant is working for the city of Emeryville?
That's correct.
And that any direction to rewrite a segment of the EIR would come from the planning staff, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that would be the result of the review of the comments that have been made tonight, plus the written comments that may be forthcoming, and this ascertaining whether or not the observations might result in the necessity to rewrite a segment. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the way it will work is that the consultants will draft responses to all the comments that have been received, and will take a cut at revising any sections of the EIR that may have come to light as a result of the public comment period, and then staff will review that, and we'll probably sit down with them and go over it, and might give them different direction than what they've produced, based on what we think is the right way to do it. But ultimately, it's the city's document, and the EIR consultant works for the city.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions for the staff? Are there any comments that any commissioners would like to make?
I'll try to keep my comments again very brief. First of all, I'd like to just thank all the residents and stakeholders for coming here tonight and offering your comments. And let me be clear in terms of why I want to specifically thank you. Thank you for your study. your hard work and your study of this proposal. As residents of Emeryville, your voices very much added to our consideration. That's one. Second, thank you for bringing to light and emphasizing and making it real what it is in terms of the impact on not just traffic, but your quality of life and the safety of where you live. You brought that concern to us and you made that real. And third, in thanking you, I'd like just to provide you motivation just to urge your continued vigilance on this topic, because we still got a ways to go. And as the city and this body continues to vet this proposal, I hope to hear from you again. So thank you very much.
I just would echo what Commissioner Kang just said and thank everybody who took the time to come out tonight. It's awesome to sit up here and take 3 pages of notes on what everybody has said, because we will comb through this when it comes back to us and look for those things. And no specific comments. I know staff is really working hard on this, and is the developer, and so hopefully we will get a revised project or product, I'm sorry, that will reflect everything that's said here tonight, and we'll talk about it then.
Ditto.
I think that these EIR documents, someone mentioned, they're very complex. It's not easy to understand them, and it's impressive that the community as a whole was able to zero in on so many specific points. I think that it's going to, this is part of the process that's going to make the project all that much better.
And I just want to echo what my fellow commissioners said. In a day of apathy, when people really don't get involved in the political process or the community process, the one thing I like being in Emeryville, and the reason I have been so involved in the city, is just because of this. Every voice that is spoken out is heard. It's not just rhetoric. It's not just something, words bouncing off a wall. We may not always agree on things, but just the engagement. People in the city of Emeryville, because of our size, we all can make a difference. So keep up the good work, and we hope to see you again.
Yes, I'm hoping that we'll get a pretty clear breakdown of the questions and comments that came out today and responses to those, or maybe some kind of reference to portions of the EIR that are in response to those. And one item that I brought up before was I would like to see some outreach to the Ohlone community and to find out if there is some kind of mitigating measure that they would be amenable to related to the findings of remains on the site. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And then I think I will close this item and take a 5-minute recess.
Hey. needed that break so bad.
All right. Shall we reconvene? Looks like we lost 90% of the audience here. So, okay, so our next item is 1056 45th Street, new unit.
Hello again, Commissioners. The materials board for this project is off to my right here. I'm happy to pass it to you if you like, or I didn't really have a good place to put it, so. All right, so 1056 45th Street. Here's the site location on the north side of 45th Street. Location is between Salem and Essex and the Triangle neighborhood.
Sarah, before you leave that, could you kind of show us in relation to like where the senior center is?
Sure. That's actually where this blue kind of tarp is because of the construction. So
I hadn't had a chance to go by that, and I really wasn't sure where this location was, so that helps.
So 43rd Street is to the south here, and that's where Anna Yates Elementary School is. 47th to the north, which is through Street, most north in the Triangle District towards Adeline, connecting to San Pablo. EBI is down the block. So I hope, does that provide some better orientation? Okay, great. So project overview. This project is to demolish existing non-residential structures that are dilapidated in the back of the property and replace it with one new residential unit and refurbish the lot with landscaping and open space. Required findings are a conditional use permit and design review. Here are some photos of the existing site. This is a residential neighborhood in the RM district. It's lots of single family mixed in with multi-unit homes and apartment complexes. Here's the existing site existing site plan. You'll see over here on the right, this is the 45th Street here, and there's an existing two-story building in the front, and the building's to be demolished in the back. The rest of the area is paved. There is not really like structured parking or formalized parking, rather. The site plan is proposed is to keep the existing two-story building, create a driveway with a planting strip to the east side of the property, create a courtyard between the existing building and the new two-story building, and then have the parking in the rear of the property with some additional landscaping portions where available. Here's a rendering of the property. The new unit actually is not very visible from the street because it's towards the back of the property behind the existing building, and it is designed to match the existing structure with color and sidings and style. The proposed new unit is 2 stories. The first floor is over here on the left. There's a living room, kitchen, dining room. There's also a trash room to be accessed from the outside of the building, a bathroom on the ground floor, and a stairway heading up. On the outside of the first floor, there's some bike parking towards the south entrance, and the north entrance faces the parking lot area. The second floor has a large family room area, another bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. So just in relation, yes, sir.
Does the trash rooms serve all the units on the property?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for clarifying that. As does the bike parking and the car parking. The proposed ground floor unit is shown here with perspective. So here we have the east side of the building. This would be facing the driveway. Over here we have the south elevation. That would be facing the courtyard. Over here we have the west. That would be facing the neighbor. And over here we have the north, which would be facing the parking area. And same for the upper floor for your orientation. Here are the elevations with the new unit and the existing units together. So on the top elevation facing from the east side, so this would be as if you were standing in the driveway. The existing 2 units are in the front here, a courtyard between the buildings and the rear unit. And then the bottom is if you were on the west side from the adjacent property, looking at the existing front units there, the courtyard, and the rear unit. The circulation, as I mentioned, on the east side of the property, there'll be a long driveway heading to the back of the property with 3 parking spaces and a little bit of landscaping. There is 1 parking space for each unit, 2 existing units, 1 proposed unit. This meets our new parking regulations. In the courtyard area between the 2 buildings, there's covered bike parking, 3 racks that provide 6 bike parking spaces. The proposed landscaping and open space, as I mentioned, the existing property is basically cemented over, so this is a large increase in permeable area and landscaping. Also, in your staff report, there is it said that 80 square feet of required open space for common area. It's actually 100. It's 20 plus the requirement, and then you're supposed to have 40 square feet of private open space as well. So 20 shared, 40 private. If you don't have the 40 private, you double that. It has to be added to the common shared open space. So that equals 80 plus 20, 100 square feet of common open space. The common open space here well exceeds that. It's over 400 square feet. So for the zoning analysis, this is technically just over the base, but we round to the closest 0.5. So this is at the base requirement for floor area ratio. It's well under the maximum building height and residential density as well. It's a level with the base for the size of the lot. Off-street parking spaces provided are 3 as required by code. And all of the setbacks are existing and meet or exceed, well, all of them exceed required setbacks. So for the conditional use permit findings, it has to be consistent with the general plan. This project meets both land use goals and policies of the general plan. It needs to be have characteristics and design of the proposed use to be compatible with the neighborhood, which this is, very consistent with the multi-unit nature of the neighborhood. The proposed use is compatible with utilities and emergency response systems. And the proposed use contributes to the general well-being of the community by providing a new dwelling unit in a residential neighborhood and removing existing dilapidated structures. And the proposed use complies with the planning regulations. For major design review findings, the design of the project must be consistent with the general plan, and it is consistent with urban design goals and policies of the general plan. It also needs to conform to the Emeryville design guidelines. It conforms to parking and access, site planning, common open space, eastern residential neighborhoods, residential site and building design, and residential unit design requirements of the design guidelines. Lastly, for the design review, it needs to be of a quality that's compatible with and will not adversely affect the surrounding area, which this project is consistent with. Staff recommends approval of this project. I'm available for any questions, and the property owner is also available for any questions you may have.
The conditions of approval were the adding of the closets. And
oh, yes. So if we go back to the floor plan, thank you for bringing that up. There we go. So in the conditions of approval require that for this project to be approved for building plan stage, that these plans must be redrawn to meet the new family-friendly design guidelines, which require linen closet, pantry area, and the dining room table needs to be shifted in a way that it's not blocking the door. They're also required to show furniture in the plans. So there's definitely room within this floor plan to accommodate those features, but there was not time to revise them before Planning Commission tonight.
How is it that the family-friendly guidelines apply to this project?
Because of the 2-bedroom.
Actually,
oh, I misspoke.
Not quite true.
Thank you, Charlie.
The design guidelines, there is a section in the design guidelines for all residential development, and then there are additional guidelines for family-friendly residential development, which only applies to projects of 10 units or more. Mm-hmm. So these guidelines here that Sarah's got up on the screen, those are for all residential development, okay. not necessarily family-friendly.
And so it's J38 that I'm referring to.
And we have conditions of approval on this project that would require modifications to the project to make it conform with these guidelines.
And
there's no requirement for washer dryer in the units then?
It's
No.
not in the design guidelines.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think Charlie and I discussed this. The reason that this project's before us is primarily due to some kind of discrepancy in the planning regulations?
Well, yeah. The, actually, a multi-unit residential development in the RM district, which this is subject to a minor conditional use permit under the planning regulations. However, in the design review section, it says that all that's subject to minor design review is 1 and 2 unit residential projects, which implies that 3-unit residential projects, i.e. multi-unit residential projects, are subject to major design review. So because the Planning Commission must approve the design review for this project, that means the entire project is coming to the Commission. So yes, it is a discrepancy in the planning regulations. We can do the use permit, but we can't, we staff can do the use permit, but we can't do the design review.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
So I have a question for you, Sarah. Is there, are there restrictions or conditions we're asking for times during the day and week for demolition and construction?
Well, all demolition and construction is subject to our noise ordinance, which limits hours both, is it 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.?
Wow. The noise is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. The construction hours?
The construction hours.
7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Yeah, so that's automatic for all projects.
So construction includes demolition too?
Yes, you need to get a permit from the building division, yes.
Thank you.
Subject to the same hours.
I have a
question.
I have a question. I don't know if you were able to discuss with the applicant the second floor layout and bedroom number 1. It shows a queen size or a king size bed, and it's backed onto a wall that has windows on the east elevation.
Sure, so you're talking about right here.
Yes.
Bedroom number 1, behind the bed, there's 2 windows shown.
Right, and that's on the east elevation. And if I'm reading the elevations correctly, the windows appear to be 3050 windows, so I think they're about 2 feet from the floor.
That seems to be consistent with the elevations shown here.
Yeah. So I'm just wanted to be sure that the applicant was aware of the challenges that might be facing them to place a bed against a window that is that low, and that there maybe this would be the moment, or if they prefer to swap those windows, put a single window on the east side and the double windows on the south side. But I'm not sure what their intentions were.
Would the applicant like to? Speak to
Good day, Commissioner. So I think actually my architect, he's not here, so I'm the owner of the property. So I'm not familiar with that, what size of the window,
Right. Well, I just wanted to alert you to that conflict that might occur between somebody wanting to put their bed up against that wall and having the windows being that low. I think that's the right wall for the bed, definitely. But the windows are pretty low right there.
So we can do modification to the window, so.
Yeah, your architect may have other options that they want to offer you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant?
I don't know if it's a question or if it's for a comment. I'll wait, I guess, and do comments. And if it becomes a question, we'll ask questions.
Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to Sarah's presentation?
No, because Rano is just like old building, just an old structure sitting over there. So if you build like the 2-story over there, it's going to be nice for the community, nice for the neighborhood, So Rano just old structure, and all the like raccoons or the rodents are still coming over there, So once we clean up, it'll be good, looking good, and the more landscaping. It'll be a good project for community, in the neighborhood.
Okay, great. Thank you. And are there any members of the public who would like to speak?
So you need to open the public hearing?
Opening a public hearing. Closing public hearing. Okay. Commissioner comments?
I think it's a nice infill project. I think these are the kind of things we need in in either the Doyle Hollis neighborhood or the Triangle neighborhood, it does increase our housing, and I think it's appropriate to scale, and for the neighborhood, I think it's a good project.
Yeah, I think it's a triumph of compatibility, certainly, and I think it will work very well in the neighborhood.
Well, I think it's a decent thing, and it certainly fits with the existing building in the front of the property, and I do think they need to include the closets and the other items that staff has recommended.
I think it does. It looks like it fits with the neighborhood. I'd love to see a little bit more articulation around the windows to make the windows a little bit more attractive. And there is a little tree on the east side of the house that I hope you're able to keep in the, I don't know whether it conflicts with the pathway, the way things are laid out, but not the junipers, but one on the side of the house. It's a nice little tree.
My only two comments were design comments on the first floor of the house. That I'm fine with this proposal. I think it's good. The bathroom is on the interior of the first floor of the house, and there's so much space between the bathroom and the storage area that's in the corner, and I just wondered why we didn't ventilate the bathroom and put the bathroom up against the wall and have a window in the bathroom. The closet could be interior, I feel like. And there's enough space to still access the stairs going up. So I would prefer that the bathroom be against that wall myself. And other than that, the only other thing was on bedroom 2 upstairs, the entrance to that bedroom is really awkward. It's this little interior, it's not like you see in some places where it articulates from a hallway in. It's the door is in this little cubby. I just wonder the accessibility of moving things like furniture in and out. It just seems like it would be really difficult to use that particular entranceway to the door. I'm not worried about that one, I guess, but it might be worth looking at that a little further, because I think that probably isn't going to be as useful as it looks on paper, maybe. Those are my only two comments.
Based on that comment, I would recommend that space be made into the linen closet and the door just be moved down.
Yeah, the door could be moved down next to bathroom number 2, and you could make that little nook in the top space there a hallway linen closet. I would agree with Buzz, so maybe that'll be a recommendation. So those are my two thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I hesitate to give design comments on it. It's a very simple structure. It has a lot of circulation for something so small. Seems like it could be designed in a way that really to really take advantage of the limited space that's there. And also, I hate to see 8-foot ceilings on great rooms. It seems like there's really no, I mean, the floor plates are being shown, but you could easily relate to the front house and have at least a 9-foot ceiling on the bottom floor. It seems like probably the front house has a higher ceiling on the top floor and maybe 8-foot ceilings on the lower floor. But yeah, I'm assuming that this because there are still some issues with related to the interior design, that staff's working with the applicant on these kinds of.
Well, the conditions primarily require redesign of the first floor. Mm-hmm. We haven't really said anything about the second floor.
Okay. Well,
we were looking at it. I mean, we acknowledge, I think, that the layout of both floors could be better. Mm-hmm. But we were looking at it through the lens of what the design guidelines call for, and so those are the things that we flagged.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I don't. It seems, it seems a little odd to me that this project's in front of us, but that the fact that it is, I guess I'm torn between actually giving comments or making conditions of approval, or just giving comments as recommendations.
Well, if I can add a couple of things to that. I agree that the bathroom downstairs would be a good idea moved, but the thing is you need to look at the way the plumbing is stacked. The one bathroom over the other. So there's a cost factor when you're moving and adding 2 plumbing lines, 2 vent lines and things like that. So that I could understand why it's there. I like the idea with it being on the wall with the window. It makes sense. The bedroom door, I had a bedroom like that as a kid. The nice thing about that is you can have your door open in your bedroom and still have privacy. You still can have the ventilation and stuff. And furniture moving in that room would be no problem because you would just come in at an angle and just come right across the corner of that closet. And there is a linen closet already behind the second-story bathroom. So if no one else has any more comments, what I'd like to do is make a motion to approve with the conditions of approval that the staff has designed, and then that the owner take in any of our comments as recommendations.
I'll second the motion.
You ready to vote on that?
Let's vote on it.
Okay. So basically, it is to approve the project with the conditions of approval recommended by staff and advice to the applicant to consider the recommendations that the commission has made.
Correct.
Commissioner Banta?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowders?
Aye.
Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kang?
Aye.
Vice Chair Keller?
Aye.
Chair Gunkel?
Aye.
7 ayes. The application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
Thank you. So then we'll move to our last item, administrative item 8A, comparison of affordable housing requirements of recently approved multi-unit residential projects.
Right, and again, I apologize for being so tardy with this report. As I said, it was a little more complicated than I anticipated, but hopefully it will provide the information that you were looking for. So at your December meeting, I was asked to go back and look at residential developments that had received certificates of occupancy since the general plan was adopted in 2009, which I did. I will say that all of them were approved prior to the general plan being adopted in 2009. So they were all approved under previous regulations. We also have 5 other projects that were approved since the general plan was adopted. So those regulations are more or less what we have now, with the modifications of the ones that were obviously most recently made. And then I've also looked at 3 projects that are currently in the pipeline for consideration. So, why is nothing happening here? Hang on. So, in the report that I emailed to you yesterday, there are a couple of tables. There's 5 tables, actually. This is the first one. This lists the projects that were received certificates of occupancy since the adoption of the general plan. And just a caveat, I didn't mention this in the report, but 3900 Adeline Street actually has sort of a half C of O. It's got a C of O for 48 of its 101 units, I think. We expect the rest of them to come online very soon. So we have these 5 projects received their C of O since 2009. Ambassador, Bakery Lofts, ME, 64th and Christie, Park on Powell, and 3900 Adeline Street. And this table summarizes the affordable units that are in those 5 projects. The number of very low, low, and moderate income units, the total number of affordable units, then over here the total number of market rate units, and that of course adds up to the total units, and percentages for each along here. Now the Ambassador project of course is a 100% affordable project, so it would kind of tend to skew the results. So because of that, I've also included down at the bottom what the totals are without the Ambassador project. You'll note that, interestingly, none of these projects, including Ambassador, provide any low-income units. So what we have are, with Ambassador, 110 very low and 20 moderate, and without Ambassador, we have 42 very low and 20 moderate units.
It's very low, 60% or 40%?
Oh, very low?
50.
50?
Yeah, very low is 50 to 80, low is 80. No, I'm sorry, I have this wrong. Moderate is 120 down to 80.
Right, yeah.
low is 80 to 50, and very low is 50 and below.
There's also something called
Extremely low is 30 and below.
Get into that here. So this is how these projects were approved. This is what they have. Now this table shows what would happen if these projects were to come forward today and to be approved under the current regulations that are now in effect. And I have not included Ambassador in this table because, again, that's a 100% affordable unit, except for the one market rate manager unit. Bakery Lofts, you'll notice, has no affordable units in it. It's 18-unit project. When it was approved, the threshold for affordable units was 30, so they didn't have to provide any. Today, they would have to provide 3. Because of the number of bonus points they would need. And actually, I should also note that under our current regulations, 2 of these projects, Bakery and Park on Powell, are actually too big. They exceed the maximum bonus FAR and residential density that we currently have. So for purposes of this exercise, I have reduced those 2 projects to the size to the maximum size that would be permitted under the current regulations. So Bakery Lofts went from 18 to 17, and Park on Powell went from 172 to 141. Bakery Lofts would have to provide the 3 affordable units. ME would have to provide 31. Park on Powell would have to provide 23, and 3900 Adeline would have to provide 17. If you compare those to the numbers up here, you can see they're all more. They'd have to provide 1 or 2 or 3 more affordable units under our current regulations than they did have to provide. I would note that the ME project is part of a PUD. It's part of the Marketplace PUD, and the 29 very low-income units in that project were the result of an owner participation agreement they entered into with a redevelopment agency because of some assistance they got from the city. So anyway, comparing these 2 charts, you can see that under our current regulations, there would be 12 more affordable units than there actually are going to be, 62 versus 74. Now the income distribution, however, is different. Under the current regulations, there would be 25 fewer very low income units, and that's somewhat skewed by the large number that are in the ME project because of that OPA. There would be 26 more low income units. That's 26 more than 0. There would be 26, which is 26 more. And there would be 11 more moderate income units. So that's a total of 12 more affordable units under the current regulations. And if you want a visual on that, this may be a little bit easier to comprehend. As entitled, those projects, those 4 projects, provide 62 affordable units, 20 moderate, 42 very low, no low income. And under the current regulations, they would be required to provide 74, made up of 31 moderate income, 26 low income, and 17 very low income. Yes.
The breakdown as to why we got to the 3 different bars, that's a proportion based on the proportion in RENA, correct?
Yes.
Proportion of our allocation for each category in RENA is just transposed as a ratio.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes, that is correct. Now, as to the projects that have been approved since adoption of the general plan, none of these projects have been built yet. So none of them have received certificates of occupancy yet. I think actually none of them, well, one is under construction. The intersection is under construction. The others are not yet. So again, we have 4 market rate projects and 1 100% affordable project. So including the EAH project at 3706 San Pablo, we have a total of 136 affordable units made up of 70 very low, 38 low, 28 moderate. Excluding this 100% affordable project, which again does include 1 market rate manager's unit, so it's really 98.9% affordable. Without EAH, we have 0 very low, 22 low, and 28 moderate for a total of 50. Now, I would note that those, the 50 are all in the Marketplace redevelopment project, because the intersection project, interestingly, it provides no affordable units. It's the only project that fits this description, and that ever will fit this description. They got in after the Palmer decision invalidated our inclusionary zoning requirement, so they didn't have to provide any inclusionary units, but they were approved before our regulations that now require affordable units in order to get bonus points, and they also were issued their building permit the week before the affordable housing impact fee took effect. Therefore, they are not required to provide any affordable units nor to pay an affordable housing impact fee. They just got in right in the right window, or wrong window, as depending on how you look at it.
Wrong window.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, Charlie. Do you happen to know, and you might not have done the math, but do you happen to know if that bar below your total without EAH, if you had total without EAH and the MAS site, what that total percent of affordable would be? Because it'll skew up, I'm assuming. If you take 105 units out of the total amount, so that we see, it's
Yeah,
like 8.9%.
no, I don't have those numbers. I mean, I could run them. I could modify
I'm just curious how much it isn't aligned with the last chart you showed us. Just out of, whether we're staying, that one, the 12.9%.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious if we kept, if you took MAS out, do we keep
Right.
pace?
Yeah, if you took MAS out, obviously this ratio would be quite a bit higher.
Be like 12 or 13, I'm thinking.
Perhaps.
Well, the Marketplace units don't conform to our most recent.
Right. The Marketplace units are the result of the development agreement that was reached between the city and the developer. And that development agreement calls for 22 low income and 28 moderate income for a total of 50. So, as I said, all of the affordable units, if you don't include EAH in these projects, are in the 3 Marketplace buildings.
Their PUD was before our current system, and the negotiation was 17 additional units, is that right? We went from 33 to 50 is what the development agreement negotiated?
No, they were not proposing to provide any affordable units. They were proposing to pay the affordable housing impact fee.
I see.
And so it was, I think probably what you're thinking was the first development agreement that was rejected by the council.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, then I don't remember what the number. It was
difference.
6.9% low income units, whatever that works out to. And so then they renegotiated and they came up to this number. So if you were to take our current regulations and apply them to the 4 market rate projects here, the MAS project, or intersection project, would require 18 units. They needed 100 bonus points, so they're at the maximum of 17% affordable units, so they would require 18. Now, the 3 Marketplace buildings are kind of interesting, and this is purely an academic exercise, because these 3 buildings would never be processed this way. But what I did was to look at them as if they were standalone projects, not part of a PUD. So I just looked at each building on its site, figured out what the site area was, what the building area was, therefore what the density was and the FAR, and figured out what would be required. And they fall into 3 different categories. Parcel A requires about a 20% density bonus, which means it could be eligible for the state density bonus system, which has a cap of 35% density bonus. So you can get that 20% density bonus by providing 5% very low income units or 10% low income units. I just assumed they would, whoops, what happened? I just assumed that they would provide I'm sorry. Oops, that's not it. I pressed the wrong button. Whoa. Okay. I just assumed that they would provide the, shoot, sorry. 5% very low income, and that would equal 8 units. Parcel C, interestingly, which is mostly a grocery store and a parking structure and has residential wrapped around it, actually doesn't have a high enough residential density to even require any bonuses. Now, bear in mind that this area has a very high zoning. It's the core area of the city, so the residential density, FAR, and height limits are the highest of anywhere in the city, which is why even a fairly dense building like Parcel C doesn't require a density bonus at all. So it wouldn't need to provide any units under our current regulations. However, it would have to pay the, as it says in the footnote down here, it would have to pay the affordable housing impact fee of $28,000 per unit, which equals about $1.8 million. And finally, Parcel D is dense enough that it would require a density bonus in excess of 35%. I think it's 40%. Therefore, it would not be subject to the state density bonus system and would require units under our system, which, but it's not the maximum. It's about 14%, so that's 31 units. So if you add all this up, you get 19 very low, 17 low, 21 moderate, 57 total. And that is 19 more very low income units, because there weren't any before. There aren't going to be any. 5 fewer low income units, 7 fewer moderate income units. Net is 7 more affordable units. So again, here's the visual for that. As entitled, these projects are going to produce 50 affordable units. Again, those are all at the public market, 28 moderate, 22 low. And under the current regulations, it would go up to 57, including 21 moderate, 17 low, and 19 very low.
So Charlie,
the Navy site is the only one that is currently underway that would meet the modern conditions, is that it?
The unit would be eligible for the state density bonus, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll get to that next.
Okay.
On the previous chart, so if I'm looking at this correctly, the current regulations would actually reduce the amount of total affordable units for the Marketplace 3 sites by 11. Is that right?
Well, yes, but bear in mind that's because I'm looking at these as individual standalone projects, not part of a PUD, and it's because Parcel C would not require any density bonus, so that has 0 affordable units.
And that's the one that goes around the store building?
That's right.
Yeah. So that may not get built.
Well, hopefully it will.
By including C, Commissioner Gunkel, with the other ones, that's what captures it into the total calculation. Yeah. You have to also remember, to his earlier point, you know, they actually didn't have to build any affordable units. That was not the regulation at the time, and they offered that in the first development agreement, and the City Council negotiated it up in the process of getting it approved, up to this 50 number. So it's kind of an anomaly because it's really not the product of the formula itself.
Well, what I discovered in going through all this is that pretty much every building is an anomaly. I mean, they all have a different set of circumstances that creates some, you know, what they end up with. Like in the previous slide, the ME project had a owner participation agreement that resulted in, you know, a certain number of units. And the bakery loss didn't require any affordable units because it was below the threshold at that time. So there are also, as you know, 3 major residential projects that are currently in the pipeline. These have all submitted applications, so they will all be before you eventually. Of course, you heard all about Sherwin-Williams tonight. So they are the 1225 65th Street project, which is 24 units. And I would note that that project, as proposed, is 100% family-friendly 2- and 3-bedroom units. They may not be quite there yet in terms of their design, but that's their stated intent. The Nady project, and now since the threshold has been dropped to 10, and actually for rental projects there is no threshold. It's any rental project now requires affordable units, so this project is captured. Nady is 186, and Sherwin-Williams PUD is, well, I'm assuming 540. That's what's in the project description in the EIR. It may not end up being that, but that's what's.
I have a question on that one. What would the total number of units, do you know what the total number of units at Sherwin-Williams would need to be for them to come under and be eligible for the state density bonus system?
Drastically.
Like, are we talking in the high 200s or the low 300s?
Well, I guess you could do
10
the math.
acres.
This is a 100% bonus.
Yeah, that's the max, I know.
So half of that is 270. So it would be 35% more than 270.
Which is 92, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you say so. So that's 362-ish,
Yeah, about.
I guess.
Okay, 360.
I don't think
yeah.
they're intending to drop it that low, but never
Okay.
know. Anyway, so under our current regulations, both 65th Street project needs 100 bonus points, and so does Sherwin-Williams. So that gets you to the 17%, made up of 3.9 very low, 5.9 low, 7.2 moderate. The Anton project, as you know, is invoking the state density bonus law because their bonus is only about 17%. And they can do that with 5% very low or 10% low. They are opting to do 5% low, which equals 8 units. So the total here is 30 very low income, 33 low, 41 moderate, total of 104. And I don't have anything to compare it to because these are the current regulations. And that's what this chart shows you. 104 made up of 41 moderate, 33 low, and 30 very low. I realized, as you saw from your email that I sent you today, that I failed to do part of what you asked me to do, which was to go back and look at the projects that were previously approved and what would the state density bonus law have done to those projects compared to the regulations that were in place when those projects were approved. At least I think that's what you asked me to do. And I can say that, I mean, obviously none of them used the state density bonus law. The question is, why didn't they? The state density bonus law has been available to developers in Emeryville since 1979, even though it wasn't actually codified in the municipal code until 2013, but it was still state law. It was still available. No developer ever asked to use it, partly because we had inclusionary zoning that required affordable units anyway and had an automatic density bonus built into that exceeded the bonus available under the state density bonus law. And so invoking the state density bonus law would have not have given any advantage to developers. So specifically, those 8 market rate projects, the 4 that received their certificate of occupancy since the general plan was adopted, and the other 4 that were approved since the general plan was adopted. Here's why none of them used the state density bonus law. Bakery loss, it was below the 30 unit threshold. They didn't have to provide any affordable units. And they had and plus they had a density bonus of over 35%, so they couldn't have used the state density bonus law anyway. Emmy, again, it was in a PUD which prescribed the density, and they were within that density, so they didn't need a density bonus. Plus, they had an OPA that required them to provide the 29 units, so the state density bonus law really didn't factor into that. Park on Powell, they had a density bonus way over 35%, and it was subject to inclusionary zoning, so if they were going to use the state density bonus law here, they actually would have had to make the project smaller. 3900 Adeline, on the other hand, didn't require any density bonus because it was in a zoning district, the old CG general commercial zone, that didn't specify any residential density. I don't know if that was an oversight or what, but there was no maximum prescribed in the CG zone, so they didn't need a density bonus. Plus, they were subject to the inclusionary zoning. The intersection project was approved at a time when no affordable units were required. Even though they needed 100 bonus points, they didn't have to provide any affordable units. So the state density bonus law would not have helped them. And finally, the marketplace, the 3 marketplace buildings are also in the same PUD that the Emmy project is in, which prescribes their density. They're well below the maximum number of units that the PUD would have allowed. And the development agreement requires them to provide 22 low-income and 28 moderate-income units. So as you can see, the state density bonus law would not have factored into any of these projects. If you go back in time, you might find some that maybe could have taken advantage of it, but nobody ever really did. So my conclusion from this is 2 things. One is, as I said, each project has a unique set of circumstances that dictates its ultimate mix of affordable units. You have to look at them all on a case-by-case basis to see, how it's going to land. And in the aggregate, looking at the big picture, looking at all these projects collectively as opposed to focusing just on, one individual project, in the aggregate, our current regulations should result in a greater number of affordable units than have been included in the recently approved market rate projects, even taking into account the occasional projects that may be eligible for the state density bonus system. And as I said in my report, this is all based on a giant spreadsheet, which I have up here, and I would be happy to show it to you if you want to see it.
You did a lot of work.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Can I ask? So first of all, thank you so much for this. I know it's sometimes tedious and you have 1,000 things to do, and getting
Luckily, I love number crunching.
Well,
I shouldn't tell you that.
So for my next task, no, I'm just kidding. So I really, really, really appreciate that you did this and the time you spent on this, and this is super helpful, and I hope that you would consider presenting this to the council as well. If
they're interested.
If they're interested, yeah, I understand. So
They did receive the report.
Okay,
they
great.
receive everything you receive.
Awesome. Because I think you did a great job with this. I did want to ask one last quick question. If you could go back a few slides to the one that had the Nady and Sherwin-Williams. It was just a couple before this. That one. So the thing I was trying to drill down on here, we got a lot of really good information tonight, and the unique nature of each of these projects is really illuminating in terms of how we had so many different options and steps we took. But when we look at Nady, so now we have one that's using the state density system, the 186 units, prior to it was 186, it did propose initially with this developer a higher number of units at first, did it not?
Correct.
And was it like 220 or 21?
Well, interestingly, initially, not under this developer, but under the previous developer, it was 260, I think. And they dropped it to 211.
That's what it was.
The reason they did that was because the fire marshal said they had to have a fire access road all the way around the building. And when they added that, it reduced the footprint of the building to the point where they had to cut out about almost 50 units.
Okay, and so we went from 211 to 186, and so, and maybe it's something for offline, but I'm just curious, at 211, how many units they would have been required if we had captured them in our local system, how many units we would have had to, 'cause I'm
Yeah.
assuming that the 186 just puts them within the 35% range.
No, actually.
Is it well over?
No, it's
Or well below, I mean?
It's well below. They only need a 17% density bonus. They could have had quite a few more units than this and still used the state density bonus law. They would, however, had to provide more affordable units to do
But just
that.
at the state rate, which is
the
the
state-
10% low or 5% very low.
Well, that only gets you a 20% density bonus at the state level. There's a table it's in the planning regulations. You get proportionally more density bonus the more affordable units you provide. I can't recall off the top of my head what the percent is for 35%, which is the maximum.
the tier,
but it's
yeah.
more than 5%.
Okay. Yeah,
very
it's
low.
like 5 or 10. You have to choose one or the other at that tier, but the tier goes up. in percent.
Exactly,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
right.
So they could have, probably had a couple hundred, probably had 200 units and still fall under the state density bonus, but they would have had to provide a higher percentage.
But it wouldn't have been much. It would have been, we'd talk 3 or 4 maybe.
Probably.
At the most.
Probably, yeah.
Wasn't it primarily just the desire to continue to use wood frame construction? That
Yes.
sort of decided?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think a number of us would like to see a high-rise on that site.
No, no one in particular.
Not Commissioner Keller or I.
A number of us have raised that question with the developer and have consistently been told it's not economically feasible. But if they were, it's zoned for 100-plus height limit. If they were to put a high-rise there, and given the way it's zoned for density, they could have produced a lot more units.
Can I ask a nuanced question on that? Do you know, and it's maybe speculating a little too much, but if they had done a high-rise, is the economic feasibility simply materials, cost, and labor, or would that also, do you think, include the fact that was that a decision that was made prior to the adoption of the new regulation, because they would not be eligible for the state bonus or the local bonus or the state bonus?
No, it
so
was
the local would have required a huge amount of affordable units.
It was because of the cost of construction.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Keller had a lengthy conversation with them about this. Did you not?
Not them in particular. I had a meeting with Gensler, the principal Gensler in the Oakland office, and he got me in contact the same day with the person that finances all their projects. He manages like $32 billion in real estate assets, and they just said it's economically feasible when you, the labor, the materials, the land, and it just, you don't get the return on investment when you go above. You'd have to go above 20, and even at that, they're not really that interested in looking at them.
And that was
currently.
not factoring in affordable units, I don't believe. was
Not
it?
at all.
Yeah,
No,
which
we
would
didn't
make
talk
it
about
even
that
worse
at all.
now for them.
Yeah. Now, one thing I would note is that they could still do 211 units under, our current system. I believe, though, that would kick them higher than a 35% bonus, which would subject them to our density bonus system.
Well, yeah, given the footprint, though, and now that there's a family-friendly, we have the bedroom requirements, that creates a minimum square footage as well. So
True.
their footprint is limited. If they're working within a height limit that they've
That's
set
true.
based on construction, they can't build smaller than a certain size for a
Yeah, and they
certain
have to have 50% 2
Percent
and
have
3
to be 2 or
bedroom
3
units.
bed, yeah.
That's true. That does reduce the number of units.
We said that's like, what, 1,100 feet minimum, or 1,000 square feet per 2-bedroom?
Well, we didn't calculate an exact number, but it was.
We didn't put a figure on that?
Well, it's in the design guidelines as an estimate of how big, but we didn't prescribe how big the units have to be.
Okay.
But the open space requirements also get, they are reduced when you reduce the amount of units that you have.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
yeah, so there's probably a variety of factors for why they ended up with 186.
Okay.
And continuing with the state density bonus and the attractions, so if you go back to, say, parcel D, just as an example at the marketplace, and you said that they couldn't really go for the state density bonus because of its, I don't know if it was FAR or what, but if they did what I kind of consider dumbing down of the project and giving us less density, which is not what we or the state really want them to do, but say if they took a story off that building and just say, we're going to try to go for the state density bonus, so we're just going to knock off a floor of this. Would that then get them, or an idea like that, would that get them eligible for the state density bonus?
Oh, I'm sure it would, because if you look at footnote 5.
That's been my major concern all along, is that we're going to dumb down these projects. We're going to get a lot less density just because they don't want to deal with our bonus requirements, and they're just going to do what they have to do to get
Well,
the
that one was
state
only
density.
barely off the bonus, that's
Exactly.
why.
That's what I think. They wouldn't have to
Yeah.
do much. They wouldn't have to do much at all.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean,
No, I'm just raising
you're
this
right.
as an...
You're right. I don't know how to solve that.
No, and I don't. That's just my concern when we first had this discussion and making these requirements, that we were going to get a lot less density just because the developers couldn't make the project pencil, so they were just going to go to the state. I've seen they're doing this a lot in Berkeley, especially around 4th Street and University. There's a number of projects there that are going for state
Berkeley
density.
is a different situation. What I've learned recently is that Berkeley they still have, as do we, inclusionary zoning for condos. And they used to, as did we, inclusionary zoning for rental. But they didn't have their own density bonus system like we have. They don't have any kind of a development bonus system in Berkeley. All they have is the state density bonus law. So what I understand, and it's too bad she's not here, Carol Johnson, who is a neighbor of Sherwin-Williams, happens to be the planning manager of Berkeley, and she was sitting right here in the front row during the Sherwin-Williams discussion. Frankly, she provided a lot of valuable information and help as we were developing our regulations. But what they do, and what developers tend to do in Berkeley is they get, well, before Palmer anyway, they got told they had to provide affordable units in their projects because of inclusionary zoning, and their response is, well, heck, if we have to provide the affordable units anyway, we might as well go for the state density bonus law and get some additional density. And so that's what they've done. It's kind of a backdoor way of doing it. One other thing that's interesting about Berkeley is that, it just took me a while to wrap my head around, and I learned about this years ago, so I think I've, sort of understand it now. There are no density requirements or restrictions in Berkeley at all. What they have, what they have are height limits, FARs, and setbacks. They prescribe the maximum building envelope. And their parking calculations are the same way. However many units you can cram into that building envelope is how many units you can have. They don't have it as units per acre. So to calculate a density bonus based on units per acre for a city that doesn't have units per acre, it gets complicated. And they have, somewhere in their code, they have this complicated formula for how No, it's not in the code. It's like a 6-page procedure manual for how you calculate density bonuses under the state density bonus law in a city that doesn't have any density regulations.
They actually do have, a lot of their zones
Do they?
do have units per square footage of lot.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not thinking of Oakland?
No, definitely Berkeley.
Okay, well, you would know better than me, but I think in the...
Do they control the density by other types of regulations indirectly, like?
Yeah, height, setback, and FAR. Building envelope.
But you're saying the maximum number of units, they could squeeze as many as they want in.
Well, there may be other considerations.
Yeah, I'm saying like the minimum bedroom sizes, things like that force you to deal with stuff.
Well, I don't know, Brad.
Open space
coverage.
Okay.
This is my
It's just really
understanding about
weird.
their higher density zoning districts. That
Yeah, I think you might be right. These are more sort of medium density.
maybe in their single-family neighborhoods or their medium-density
Yeah.
neighborhoods, they have a, units, number of square feet of lot area per unit, right?
Well, thank you. I can't say thank you enough. This is an excellent thing to have and to get to review, and I really appreciate all the time you put into it. Thank you so much.
Quite welcome. I take it you don't want to see the spreadsheet?
I would actually, I would love a copy of
Just
it
give
if I
him
could
a
get
copy.
it. Yeah, I would love a copy of it.
Email it to him.
It's pretty messy.
Just email it to me, Charlie. That's
You could
fine.
just flash it on the screen.
Okay.
We can adjourn with it or something.
Well, here it is. And it goes, oops, wait a minute.
It goes on and on.
It goes up to here. I went
yeah.
back to Watergate and PPP. But that wasn't relevant to this discussion, but I did get the data on it.
I love it. You can send that to me.
And what's highlighted in blue here is the ones I looked at for this report. And then the columns here have the number of BMRs. And
You know, this isn't good to show us because we asked you to do a lot and you went over that. So it's kind of telling us, wow, look how much work Charlie can do. You just shot yourself in the foot.
I think so. You're right. Anyway, we got the side area, the building area, the FAR,
That's
limit.
super helpful.
the density, the points that are needed. Things that are in red are too big.
So might as well just send it to all of us.
Really?
Yeah, I want to.
Okay. And then the
Since
calculations.
you did all this work, I have
Yeah,
to appreciate
I
it.
really like that.
I'd like
All
to
right.
see it.
So Charlie, having done all this work, do you have actually a total number of affordable units that
In
exist
Emeryville?
In Emeryville, yeah.
You know, I've mucked around with this spreadsheet so much, I'm afraid I might have goofed it up. Is it on here?
And probably more importantly, what would that, what percentage of all units?
Oh,
does
yeah,
that
I've done
reflect?
that before.
Isn't that all in the RENA and housing element?
Well, no, it's not the same as RENA.
Oh.
RENA is what we're supposed to
I
provide.
thought that showed how much we did provide in a given year.
Well,
No, it's the needs allocation. It's an 8-year window where we're given a projected amount. At the last housing committee meeting where we discussed BMR units, I think we have like 790 to 800 total affordable units in Emeryville.
it's around 12%.
Yeah, it's about
Total units in
790
Emeryville,
total
which
affordable
is
units.
interesting if you compare to Berkeley. Berkeley is like 3% or
Does that
something.
include the condos too that are affordable?
Yes, it includes everything. Right. In fact, it's interesting if you go back, well, not to dwell on this too long, but our inclusionary zoning didn't kick in until 1990. So that's when we adopted our first inclusionary zoning. So 1990 is right here. If you look before 1990, there were only, I think, 2 projects that had BMRs. These 2. One was Emery Glen, which is a 100% affordable county project over in the north part of town, and the other is the Artist Co-op, which has, let's see, 39 out of 53 units are below market rate.
I thought Bridgewater had some tax credit units in it, didn't it?
Are you thinking of Bridge Court?
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, Bridge Court is down here somewhere. It does.
There
Bridge
it
Court has affordable units too. It's down here somewhere. I don't know.
21, line 21.
Yeah, there you go, right there. It has 88 out of 220, 40%.
Where is that located?
Bridge Court, it's right across 40th Street.
Oh, okay.
That's the big one that's
Yeah.
part of East Bay Bridge Shopping Center.
It's getting a new paint job,
Yeah,
getting repaired stucco.
more than a paint job.
It's in there too, doesn't it?
Always under a tarp.
There's 2 buildings, but it's one project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's 2.
Yeah. Have you seen enough? You want
Yeah.
to see more?
Thank you.
Sure.
Good job, Charlie.
Hey,
Thank you.
Nice job.
Charlie. Commissioner comments?
I did just want to say there's another restaurant open in the public market, but I can't remember the name of it. It's Koja something. It's Korean, and they have really interesting. They make tacos. They make like a burger kind of sandwich. That's not really a burger, so it's really different. So we've got now, I think.
That's not really Korean.
What's that? Most of their recipes say that there's Korean. It's Korean.
I'll give you fusion. I won't give you Korean.
Oh, it's definitely fusion. Yeah, it's definitely fusion. But it's now we've got, I think, 6 or 7 stalls in the public market again.
Cool.
So.
I would also just let you know that the cafe in the city storage building is now open.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
a bar.
Brad and I were there.
The bar and restaurant. Yeah, I saw you there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. And we were there. They were really, really busy that night.
Yeah.
And I asked them, and they've been open 9 days, and they said all 9 days have been like that.
Yeah, they seem to have some quirks to work out.
Oh, yeah. I liked it, though. I thought
Yeah.
it was and I really kind of wanted a coffee place there just because I like them. But I think this is a great fit, and it's really a kind of a cool, fun place.
Yeah.
And Ike's is open now.
What is?
Ike's Sandwich.
Oh, it's
Sandwich
open?
shop. It's open. They soft opened yesterday.
Oh, cool.
And through the weekend, they're doing like one odd shift a day just to get everybody trained. But starting Monday, it's open full time. So
Right
go get a
on.
sandwich.
Hey. Cool.
Yeah.
Meeting is closed.